Chapter 103. Send a message to the sect. He Shi Yun will attack Centipede Gorge, Nian Shi Yun will attack Hui Yen Pu, and we will attack Nanda. Chongqing casually tossed aside the howling lake golden sword, and straightened his body. His round and plump face was solemn. Chinese network. His voice reverberated in the main hall. When the people below heard it, their expressions tightened. Everyone knew that Qinsong School had been fighting with the Three Lakes demons for more than 10 years, but until now, they had never attacked Jade Blood Pool from the front. Every time they attacked from the east and west, so they were very familiar with these two paths. Centipede Depression was in the west, at the edge of Jade Blood Pool. It was a gentle slope with no peaks or ridges, making it easy to enter and exit. Cliff Pool was in the east. Decades ago, it was a shallow pool. Although it was now covered by the lake, the depth of the water within 100 miles was less than 10 feet. But South Pond was different. It was a vast body of water with countless lake islands. Fog and chaotic formations were everywhere. It could be said to be a natural gateway to the outer lake of Jade Blood Pool. Almost no one in Qinsong School had ever been there. However, Fan Chongqing understood that his purpose of this trip was to break through the path to the center of Jade Blood Pool and sweep away the obstacles for the sect. Naturally, he could not avoid the battle. He could only go forward. On the other hand, wasn't this giving him more opportunities to gain merit? Moreover, Hua was already prepared for this. He looked at a cultivator below and said with a smile, "Junior apprentice brother Qin, take out the thing." A tall and thin cultivator walked out and stood in front of the hall. He took out a scroll and slowly opened it in front of everyone, revealing a mountain and river topographic map. Fan Chongqing pointed from his sleeve and said, "Junior apprentice brothers, please take a look. This is the geographical map of Jade Blood Pool that I managed to find. On it, the islands of South Pond and the distribution of the various underwater residences are roughly drawn. Although it is not very detailed, it is enough for us to use." Everyone took a look, and sure enough, the various lakes and islands were outlined on the map. Not only that, but there were also annotations at the side. For a moment, they all felt relieved. With this map, they wouldn't have to randomly run around aimlessly. Fan Chongqing saw that no one was unwilling and nodded in satisfaction. He turned around and asked, "Junior Marshal Brother Qin, which island is the closest to us?" Junior Marshal Brother Qin looked at the map in his hand and gestured with his finger. He then raised his head and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Fan, the Guyuan Island of the 18 southern swamp islands is the closest to us. The island master's name is Quan Gongwang, and he is a squid shrimp. He has cultivated for at least 300 years and is at the 3rd level of the mystic light realm. Luo Mingzhou once made him a Yao general." Fan Chongqing clapped and said with a smile, "All right, let's go there." He activated the talisman in his hand, and the huge figure of the flying spiritual pivot turned in the air and quickly flew to the destination of this trip. An hour later, a fog gradually spread out before them. Occasionally, thick clouds would drift past. It was unknown what was mixed within the fog, but even the vision of the cultivators in the hall was greatly affected. They were unable to see clearly. Suddenly, the golden bells above the main hall rang loudly. Fan Chongqing knew that they were near a place with dense demonic qi. He waved the talisman and stopped flying. He looked at Junior Brother Qin with a questioning look in his eyes. Junior Brother Qin calculated with his fingers, then cupped his hands and said, "Senior Brother Fan, we should have entered the territory of origin returning island." At this time, the disciple in charge of scouting came up to the hall and reporting to Senior Brother Fan, "There is a demonic general with mystic light realm cultivation blocking the way. He claims to be the guardian of this place and is cursing. He wants us to retreat immediately, or else he will kill his way into the hall." Fan Chongqing shook his hand and threw out a black screen after hearing this. When this item was unfurled in front of the hall, the original ink painting on it seemed to have come to life and spread out in all directions. Not long after, a vast world appeared on it, and the light of the water lake reflected the scene below. However, the imperfection was that the fog and clouds were still lingering. There were more than 100 flags erected below the flying spiritual pivot, and a demonic general with green skin and bulging eyes stood on a black cloud about 5 acres wide. He was holding a half-moon steel trident, and he was cursing non-stop. However, his words were unclear, and no one knew what he was saying. Fan Changqing couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. He pointed down and said, "Junior brothers, who will go and slay this demonic general?" Zhang Yan looked into the hall and saw that everyone was eager to try. It was obvious that they all wanted to fight, but there were 18 demonic islands here, so he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't have a chance to fight. Thus he just smiled and sat still. Fan Changqing looked around, and his gaze landed on the cultivator in feather robes on the right. He said in a deep voice, "Junior brother Ren, this is the first battle. You should go personally." Junior brother Ren stood up with a smile on his face. He bowed slightly to Fan Changqing, then glanced at Zhang Yan, curled the corner of his mouth, and slowly walked out of the grand hall. The white-feathered hawk beneath him let out a long cry, spread its wings, and flew under his feet, allowing him to step on its back. Everyone in the hall didn't say anything after seeing that he was the one to fight. It was obvious that they knew they couldn't win against him. Zhang Yan had heard from Fan Changqing that this person's name was Ren Mingyao, and he was at the 3rd level of the mystic light realm. He was also Meng Zhen's disciple, and it seemed that Meng Zhen valued him a lot. Ren Mingyao walked down the hall and approached the demonic general. He was relaxed and had a hint of arrogance on his face. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and he stood on a flying beast. From afar, he did look like a deity. When he arrived in front of the demonic general and heard the demonic general's unclear words, he couldn't help but say coldly, "You're wearing scales and armor, and you want to learn the human language?" The demonic general seemed to be enraged when he heard this. He roared and stabbed with his half-moon trident. Ren Mingyao curled his lips and took a step back. He took out a black compass from his sleeve and threw it forward. With a point of his finger, the compass immediately began to spin. Rays of golden sword chi flew out from it. They swayed in the air and turned into sharp flying swords that slashed at the demon general. As soon as Fan Changqing saw this, he turned to Zhang Yan and said, "Junior martial brother, look, this is Junior martial brother Ren's myriad killing sword plate. This magic treasure has been refined with no less than 15 divine weapons, as well as more than 1,000 flying swords with names. The metal chi has been absorbed into it, and once it is released to attack the enemy, it will be like 1,000 swords attacking at the same time, sharp and unstoppable." Zhang Yan looked at it and said with a smile, "This treasure is named 10,000 kill sword disc, but there are only 1,000 swords. I think there must be something special about this treasure." Fan Changqing narrowed his eyes and patted the armrest, saying, "Junior brother Ren is right. This treasure was left behind by a senior of the Yuanyang sect. Originally, this sword disc contained the golden sword chi of 10,000 weapons, but most of it was lost when the senior passed away. Junior brother Ren said that he wanted to restore the power of this treasure, so my master gave it to him." The demon general below looked like a valiant person. Seeing the 1,000 flying swords slashing towards him, he did not dodge. Relying on the divine weapon in his hand, he actually rushed head-on. He did not know that the flying swords looked like real objects, but were actually formed from sword chi. In just one move, he was cut into pieces, and his arms were torn to pieces. At this moment, he felt that something was wrong. He was about to turn and escape when Ren Mingyao laughed and pointed with his fingers. The 1,000 sword chi behind him surged forward, and in the blink of an eye, he was turned into nothingness. Ren Mingyao raised his hand and threw out a technique absorbing jade tablet, absorbing the demon's blood essence. He then rolled up his sleeves and put the half-moon trident into his sleeves as well. Then he activated the sword disc, and the 1,000 sword chi rushed back and forth on the black cloud, dispersing it. Strands of blood chi floated in the air, about 1,000 of them, and all flew into the technique-absorbing jade tablet. When there was no more blood chi, Ren Mingyao smiled proudly and raised his hand to keep the tablet. He then returned to the Ling Shu Flying Palace. Returning to the palace, he bowed to Fan Changqing and said, "Senior brother Fan, I didn't fail you." Everyone in the palace saw him kill a demon general and kill thousands of demon soldiers with a wave of his hand. Their eyes were filled with fire, and they couldn't wait to be the next one. Fan Changqing raised his hand and signaled for Ren Mingyao to dispense with the formalities. He smiled and said, Junior brother Ren really did not disappoint us. Junior brothers, there is no need to be impatient. There are a total of 18 demon islands in the south, and we have only passed one of them. We are under the orders of the ancestor to attack the 3 lakes, so of course, we have to get rid of these thorns one by one. Junior brothers, you don't have to worry about not having any merits. After comforting them a bit more, he waved the tablet and flew to the next island. In the next day, they swept through 5 islands, and every time they attacked 1 or 2 mystic light realm cultivators would go down to deal with them. By dusk, only 3 cultivators, including Zhang Yan, had not gone out to fight. Although the group fought in a few places, they didn't provoke any powerful demons, so Zhang Yan wasn't surprised. He had once heard from Luo Xiao that the Jade Blood Pool was actually formed by the gathering of hundreds of demons, and the demons often fought and killed each other. The reason why Luo Mengze was nominally the demon lord was because his tribe was the strongest here. The so-called demon generals and guards were just empty titles. It was common for them to kill others, ask for a talisman from Luo Mengze, and then take over the cave. Fan Chongqing was thinking about whether or not to stop fighting today when a loud noise came from the palace. He frowned and raised his hand, stopping the flying palace. Soon, a disciple guarding the Wang clan came up and reporting to senior brother Fan, a demon general jumped out of the lake in front of us and said that he wanted to wait with us. Demon general? Only one? Everyone looked at the screen, and sure enough, there was only a single demon general standing in midair. He was 3 meters tall, with protruding golden eyes and striped hair. His chest and abdomen were broad, and he held a large sword in his hands. His body looked majestic and mighty, but there was a sense of laziness in his expression. The remaining 2 mystic light realm cultivators who hadn't fought yet had joyful expressions. Killing 1 demon general was equivalent to 1 merit, and he came alone. Wasn't this merit coming to their doorstep? A tall cultivator immediately stood up and asked, "Senior brother Fan, it's time for junior brother to fight, right?" Fan Chongqing glanced at him and felt that it was strange for this demon general to suddenly appear here. He thought for a moment before saying, "Junior brother Cheng, this demon is strange. Why don't you go with junior brother Qi?" Junior brother Cheng frowned and said unhappily, "If I go with him, won't I scare that demon general away? I can go alone." He thought in his heart, "Senior brother Fan is so unreasonable. If junior brother Qi goes with me, who will get the merit?" Fan Chongqing squinted his eyes again and said, "If that's the case, then go." Junior brother Cheng was overjoyed and left with the order. All the disciples looked at the screen, but the mist was thick, so they could only faintly see junior brother Cheng arrive in front of the demon general. The 2 figures merged and separated, and a person landed. Everyone looked at each other. The fight between the 2 was very short, and there was mist blocking their eyes, so no one could see who it was. Not long after, a disciple came to the hall to report, "Senior brother Fan, senior brother Cheng was killed by the demon general in 1 move." Fan Chongqing's expression didn't change, and he said, "Who wants to go?" This time, the cultivator with the surname Qi came up and said, "Junior brother, I'm willing to go." He didn't wait for Fan Chongqing to agree and flew out of the hall, heading straight for the demon general. Fan Chongqing shook his head slightly and simply closed his eyes. After a while, there was a commotion outside. Another disciple came up to the hall and said, reporting to Senior Martial Brother Gong originally had the upper hand when he went down, but for some reason, his mystic light couldn't even touch the demon general. Instead, he was killed by the coin. Fan Chongqing's eyes opened and he frowned slightly. As a core formation cultivator, he had to control the restrictions of the Flying Palace and defend against sneak attacks from other demons. He obviously couldn't show himself, so he looked at Ren Mingyao. Chapter 104. When Fan Chongqing heard this, his eyebrows furrowed even tighter. He slowly shook his head and said, "That's not appropriate. This demon general is hiding a killing move. No matter who it is, I'm afraid that 1 person will not be able to withstand it. In my opinion, we should work together and kill him." He deliberately avoided the topic of Zhang Yan and said that 1 person could not fight the enemy. However, Ren Mingyao's eyes flashed and he pretended to be cautious. He said, "Otherwise, this place is vast and the islands are scattered all over the place. This demon general's cultivation level is not below ours. If we work together, he will definitely escape. How can we catch up to him?" Senior brother Fan, are you saying that junior brother Cheng and junior brother Qi Lian died in vain? He purposely raised his voice when he said the last two sentences. Everyone nodded and said, "Senior brother Ren is right." Ren Mingyao boasted that he was talented and was one of the best disciples under Meng Zhen. However, everyone knew that only those who were valued by Qi Yuntian would have a place in the sect in the future. Qi Yuntian was the third-generation senior brother. In the future, he would most likely take over the position of sect leader. By then, he would need a group of people to support him. However, all these years, he had not recruited anyone. Ren Mingyao was not in a hurry. Both of them were from the same master and he was the youngest disciple under Meng Zhen. He felt that he had the highest chance of being valued. However, Zhang Yan's appearance caused him to be on guard. As soon as Qi Yuntian came out of his closed-door training, he immediately took Zhang Yan out of the Devil's Shui. This action was thought-provoking. What made him feel threatened was that although Zhang Yan had only been cultivating for a short period of time, he had made rapid progress. At the same time, Zhang Yan was a true disciple and what he practiced was Jinren Sun's Lan Yun's secret book. When he put all these points together and calculated carefully, he suddenly realized that his advantage was almost non-existent in front of Zhang Yan. There was a high possibility that Zhang Yan would take away the position that Qi Yuntian originally arranged for him. This person cannot be left alive. This was a great opportunity. If Zhang Yan was killed by this demon general, that would be the best. If not, he could use this opportunity to observe this person's strength and plan for the future. Fan Chongqing hesitated for a moment. It was Qi Yuntian who said to him after they left the Spirit Page Island, "Junior brother Fan, junior brother Zhang is very important. If you don't protect him well, I will hold you responsible." Although his tone was flat, Fan Chongqing shivered at that time. One must know that although they were all disciples of Meng Zhen, Qi Yuntian was the only one who had inherited the true teachings from Meng Zhen. The rest of the disciples were all inherited from Qi Yuntian. Although he usually did not put on the airs of a senior brother, Fan Chongqing was still very respectful towards him. Among the top 10 disciples in the sect, only 4 of them were from the master and disciple sect, but they were able to maintain a stalemate with the 6 disciples from the aristocratic families. A large part of the reason was that Qi Yuntian's strength was the strongest among the disciples. How could Fan Chongqing dare to not listen to what he said? He thought he understood Qi Yuntian's meaning. Zhang Yan came to him to gain credit. If he accidentally died, then he would be held responsible. He sighed, thinking that if he sided with Zhang Yan in front of everyone, then he would lose face in the future. However, he did not dare to disobey Qi Yuntian's words. No matter what, he had to protect Qi Yuntian. He gritted his teeth and was about to speak, but who knew that at this time, Zhang Yan stood up, smiled and cupped his hands. "Senior brother Fan, why don't you let junior brother go down and test this demon general?" Fan Chongqing opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Ren Mingyao immediately said, "Good. Junior brother Zhang volunteering for the mission is truly amazing." He turned his head and cupped his hands at Fan Chongqing. "Senior brother, since senior brother Zhang has said so, you can't be too unreasonable, right?" Fan Chongqing looked at Zhang Yan with a complicated expression, but did not speak. He sighed, sat there, and lifted his sleeves. Ren Mingyao's eyes flashed with a hint of success. He suddenly turned around and said loudly, "Junior brother Zhang will definitely succeed. We will wait here for junior brother's good news." Zhang Yan smiled slightly, but did not choose to fly out immediately. Instead, he walked down the hall with a composed expression, and then walked out of the hall's door step by step. On the jade platform outside the door, more than 200 Ming Qi disciples saw him come out, and involuntarily moved to make way for him. When he came to the edge of the jade platform, he stopped and stood there quietly, as if he was thinking about something. Someone in the hall immediately mocked. "Could it be that this Zhang Yan is afraid? If you don't have real skills, don't come to the 3 pools to kill the demon general." What true disciple, even if he dies, he will only be a joke. Junior brother Zhang, why are you dilly-dallying? Are you waiting for the demon general to escape by himself? Zhang Yan did not care. He closed his eyes as if he was sensing something. When all the voices slowly faded, it was as if he was the only one left in the world. His spiritual vigor became unprecedentedly clear and pure. In his consciousness, he could clearly feel that there was a thick cloud floating towards this place. Yes, this is the time. He opened his eyes and suddenly leaped. In a split second, a golden rainbow pierced through the sky from top to bottom. The demon general was originally lazy, but at that moment, his expression suddenly changed. With a loud roar, he raised the big axe in his hand to block, but a golden ray collided head-on with it. There was a loud bang as if the sky was collapsing. The disciples who were watching the battle lost their footing and fell to the ground. In a split second, the fog dispersed and the golden fire rolled up, causing the sky to be filled with talisman. Everyone in the hall was originally looking at the screen coldly, but suddenly, the fog spread and the sun was covered. In a flash, there seemed to be a flash of light, followed by a thunderous explosion. Then, the disciples outside the hall shouted in unison, their voices shaking the heavens. Everyone could not help but look at each other in confusion. Just as they were puzzled, an object suddenly flew in from outside the hall and landed on the ground, rolling non-stop. Drops of blood extended from the front of the hall to the middle of the hall. Outside, Zhang Yan shouted, "The demon general's head is here. Can it be used as a tribute to the two senior brothers' souls in heaven?" Fan Changqing suddenly stood up. His face was filled with surprise. However, Ren Mingyao's expression changed greatly. Then, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression became so gloomy that it seemed like it could drip water. Everyone in the hall was dumbstruck and extremely shocked. Such an extraordinary demon general was actually killed by Zhang Yan in an instant. Could it be that the strength of elite disciples is really so formidable, and their skill is even higher than Zhang Yan's? For a moment, the hall was silent. The sound of footsteps was heard, and Zhang Yan walked into the hall with a natural expression. As his sleeves fluttered, there was an indescribable calmness and ease, as if he had just casually gone out for a walk. At this moment, a figure in front of him blocked his way. Junior brother Zhang killed this demon in a short time. Congratulations, but senior brother wants to ask about one thing. Ren Mingyao took a step forward, stared into his eyes, and said, "What method did senior brother Zhang use to kill this demon?" Zhang Yan looked at him with a faint smile. "Senior brother Ren, you want to know?" He gently raised his hand, and Ren Mingyao suddenly saw a golden light flying towards his face. Seeing that it was too late to avoid it, he hurriedly rolled on the ground, but the light spontaneously combusted in the air with a ting sound and instantly turned into a pile of ashes. Ren Mingyao looked embarrassed as he stood up, raised his hand and pointed at Zhang Yan, and said in surprise, "You?" Zhang Yan put his hands behind his back and said with a smile, "Senior brother Ren, don't be nervous, this is just an ordinary sword talisman. Senior brother is an expert in using sword chi, why are you panicking?" He took a step forward, helped him up, and whispered in his ear, "If you used the same talisman to deal with that demon general, I'm afraid your head would have been separated from your body." Ren Mingyao was shocked, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. He wanted to explode, but he knew that this was not the time, so he suppressed the anger in his heart, and a smile appeared on his face. "So that's how it is. Senior brother's knowledge is shallow, and I've embarrassed myself in front of junior brother." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. Interesting, this Ren Mingyao was humiliated by him, but he was able to endure it, and he had to pay more attention to him in the future. Although Ren Mingyao was embarrassed just now, his ability to adjust himself was extremely strong. When he returned to his seat and sat down, nothing could be seen on his face, as if the incident just now had never happened. But at this moment, his heart was gloomy. What happened just now? Zhang Yan clearly did not do anything, but he felt a murderous aura, as if he could really kill him in one move. He calmed himself down, and his heart was filled with doubt. Was it just his illusion? Then he thought again, sword talisman? That seems to be the talisman of Guangyun's sect, and I heard that it is very powerful, but I wonder which sect he learned it from. This Zhang Yan's foundation is shallow after all, and after being Zhou Changju's disciple, he couldn't learn any profound techniques, and could only learn from second-rate sections. It's good that he spent all his effort on this, and although he looks powerful now, he will definitely not be as good as me in the future. Zhang Yan sat down again. Just now, he used the golden fire mystic ray to directly destroy the demon general's body, and for this attack, he deliberately waited for the moment when the thick cloud blocked everyone's sight, and the talisman was just a cover. Anyway, Qinsong School did not prohibit people from learning techniques from other sections. However, what he said to Ren Mingyao was not all empty words. The power of the real sword talisman was indeed extraordinary, and it was not much weaker than his star's sword pill, but to refine such a talisman, even with his current wealth, he could not afford it, and if he did not have the refining door chant of the 5 talisman techniques, he could only use it once. Fan Changqing saw that when Zhang Yan returned to the hall, his whole body relaxed, and only felt that he had broken free from some shackles. He laughed and said, "Junior brother Zhang came back safely, and also killed the demon general. It is really fortunate." Just as he finished speaking, a golden sword suddenly flew into the hall. Fan Changqing was startled, and with a wave of his hand he took it into his hand, took out the letter and read it, and couldn't help but be overjoyed. "Good. Tomorrow the sect will send senior brother Ning and senior brother Fong to come by Ling Shu Flying Palace to receive us, so that we won't have to fight alone, and we have more confidence in dealing with the demons in Jade Blood Pool." Zhang Yan was slightly surprised and said, "Senior brother Ning? Is it senior brother Ning Chong Xian Ning?" Fan Changqing laughed and said, "Yes, this letter says that senior brother Ning Chong Xian, with the help of senior brother Qi, broke through the confinement in one fell swoop and condensed a gold core, and also a second-grade core. Since then, our Qinsong School has another core transformation cultivator." Chapter 105. Zhang Yan had heard from Zhou Changju that the transforming core stage was extremely difficult to cross. If the opening of the meridians was the foundation of the Tao, then the Jin Dan was the ladder to immortality. Therefore, the Jin Dan was also known as the Heaven Ladder. First, Ning Chongxian had been cultivating for less than 50 years and was already a transforming core cultivator. Moreover, his Jin Dan was of the second grade, 1 in a million. He was indeed worthy of being Sun Jinren's most valued disciple. At this moment, everyone present faintly felt that perhaps the ranking of the top 10 disciples would change in the backdoor competition in 2 years. Fan Changqing happily put down the letter and looked at Zhang Yan. He slapped his forehead and said, "I almost forgot, junior martial brother Zhang has not obtained the Jade Tablet yet. However, since you have killed the demon general, I will record this merit for you." Finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and a white jade flew towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan raised his hand and caught the white jade. He felt a chill in his palm, as if he was holding a piece of ice. With a shake of his wrist, he threw the jade into his sleeve. When the jade talisman returned, he only needed to use his own blood to refine it. Like a magic weapon, he could use it as he wished. However, if the blood was forcibly removed by others, it would become completely useless. There was no need to worry about others taking credit for it. Although he did not have this jade talisman and was unable to obtain the demon general's blood essence, he was able to kill the demon general in front of everyone's eyes. With the head as a witness, he was able to record a stroke in the merit book. The Achievement and Virtue Courtyard also recognized this. Today, in the conquest of Sanbo, the disciples were courageously advancing because the Qinsong School only accepted disciples. Apart from the direct disciples, the rest of the disciples would only be taught the ordinary methods of cultivating qi. Only when one had made a contribution to the school, or was valued by a teacher, could one learn the Xiangong. Therefore, there were usually hundreds of disciples under a cultivator, but only a few would be able to learn the Xiangong. Even if it was the celestial sect of wonders, the exchange of clansmen and disciples was only to maintain the relationship between each other. The techniques passed down from generation to generation would not be easily spread out. Just like Wang Pan on the Scarlet Haze Island, Duda took him in as a disciple only for the sake of the family's interests. He didn't really teach Wang Pan the great Tao, so even after he died, Duda still treated him indifferently. As for the famous 3 skills and 5 scriptures and 12 supernatural powers of the sect, there were rules in the sect. Apart from the sect leader, no one was allowed to teach them. Even if one had accumulated enough merit, they still needed the approval of a group of zhenren and elders before they could be taught. Fan Chang stood in the main hall and said, "It is already late today. My fellow apprentices, please disperse. Even if you are going to attack Sanbo, you must not neglect your cultivation." Seeing that everything was fine, everyone dispersed. Ren Mingyao was the last to walk out of the main hall. He looked at the red sunset on the horizon, and suddenly he laughed out loud. If there was someone else here, they would definitely find it strange. "Zhang Yan, oh Zhang Yan, I was almost fooled by you." The so-called sword talisman is a combination of the 5 essences of the essence of the 5 elements. It is very expensive and can only be used once. Even if you still have sword talismans on you, you won't have many. It's just a bluff. Let's see how many times you can be so arrogant. He laughed coldly at the same place a few more times before he walked away. After Zhang Yan returned to his courtyard, he first cultivated the jade talisman. Then he calmed his mind and meditated. When he was in meditation, he suddenly heard a soft sound of a silver bell. He slowly opened his eyes. He could tell that the sound was summoning everyone to the main hall. After thinking for a while, he got up and walked out of the door. He leaped and turned into a ray of light and flew towards the main hall. At this time, all the disciples also heard the summons and rushed over. Before long, they were all in the main hall. After Zhang Yan entered the main hall, he looked up and saw that Fan Changqing was sitting on his right-hand side. His original position was occupied by a handsome cultivator in a white robe with eyebrows that reached his temples. "Senior Marshal Brother Ning?" Zhang Yan was startled. Didn't Ning Chongxian say that he would only arrive tomorrow? How come he had already come tonight? But when he came in, he didn't see the spiritual pivot flying palace. Was there some mystery behind this? He calmly went to his seat and sat down, carefully sizing up the other party. After the elixir was dissolved, Ning Chongxian was slightly different from before. Sitting there, the original swift and fierce qi seemed to have been restrained, but in fact, it was like a hidden sword tip, ready to be released at any time. When everyone had arrived, Ning Chongshuan's gaze swept down without stopping. When it passed by Zhang Yan's face, it paused slightly and then nodded slightly. Then he turned to Fan Changqing and said, "I heard that Senior Marshal Brother Fan has a map of the Jade Blood Pool here?" Fan Changqing waved his hand and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Qin, give me the map." Junior Marshal Brother Qin hurriedly got up and walked a few steps forward, unfolding the map in front of the two. Ning Chongxian glanced at it and memorized all the landforms. He asked, "How many places did Senior Marshal Brother Fan take yesterday?" Fan Changqing reached out and pointed a few points on the map. He said, "These 6 places were taken during the day." Ning Chongxian frowned. Senior Marshal Brother is too conservative. Without waiting for Fan Changqing to speak, he reached out and pointed at the northernmost island in the southern Dang Lake. He said, "This is Bamboo Island. We will take it tonight." Fan Changqing was stunned and hesitated. He said, "Bamboo Island is in the southern Dang Lake, backed by perching Eagle Land Island. There are many big demons there. If we go deeper, we will reach the inner lake of the Jade Blood Pool. If we take it early, we may not be able to defend it. Why don't we take the entire southern Dang Lake and then slowly plan?" Ning Chongxian interrupted him. "It's okay. This time I brought the Jing Luo formation flag. It's enough to defend. Besides, I can handle the demons on Bamboo Island myself. It won't make things difficult for Senior Marshal Brother." Fan Changqing nodded slowly. He said, "How can I cooperate?" Ning Chongxian stood up and smiled faintly. He said, "I alone am enough. Senior Marshal Brother, please wait for a moment." When he finished, everyone only saw a flash of light in front of them and then he was gone. Fan Changqing sat in the hall and smiled bitterly. Ning Chongxian was very strong and had Qiyuntian's secret order. He didn't dare to disobey. He couldn't help but sigh secretly. He said, second grade Dan. I'm afraid junior marshal brother Ning will surpass me. After sitting in silence for about an hour, a beam of green light flew into the hall. Ning Chongxian appeared on the main seat and said, Fan Shixiang, I have killed all the evildoers on Bamboo Festival Island. We can move to this island now. Fan Chongqing nodded. It's all up to you. He took out the talisman and activated it. The flying palace of the spiritual pivot flew straight to the north. In less than a moment, it was above Bamboo Island. There were two gateway-like horizontal peaks on the island, which seemed to divide the island into 3 sections. Looking down from above, it looked like a section of bamboo. Ning Chongxian waved his sleeve and opened the restriction he set up earlier. The flying palace landed on one of the horizontal peaks. As soon as they arrived, everyone suddenly felt that the original fuzzy situation had changed. With 2 core transformation cultivators guarding this place, it was as if a sharp pillar was wedged in front of the jade blood pool, firmly nailing it here. In an instant, it separated the remaining 12 islands in the South Dang Pond from the demon horde in front of them. If the demon cultivators with Yuanian cultivation didn't come, the demons on the islands behind them would be at their mercy. The demon cultivators on the perching eagle island in front of them were forced by Ning Chongxian and Fan Chongqing, so they didn't dare to move easily. Previously, Fan Chongqing's behavior was steady, but it lacked a sharp and aggressive intention. But now, as soon as Ning Chongxian arrived, he directly pushed all the disciples to the front to face the many great demons. Everyone felt as if they were standing on a reef in the middle of a river, about to face the turbulent torrent. A string in their heart could not help but suddenly tighten. Suddenly, a kind of momentum of a life and death struggle was born. This was the grasp of momentum and the understanding of Tao. It was not that Fan Chongqing was not as good as Ning Chongxian, but the two's Tao was different, so their actions were poles apart and had a different impact on everyone's state of mind. A cultivator sitting next to Ren Mingyao whispered, Senior Marshal Brother Ren, Senior Marshal Brother Ning's action is like pushing himself to the throat of the jade blood pool. Can the old demon bear it? Ren Mingyao sneered. Even if he can't bear it, he has to bear it. But Ren Mingyao said indifferently, Reverend Zhu and Reverend Yen have been sitting on the star-searching platform day in and day out to sense the qi activity. If I were to leave the Immortal's cave, I would definitely be detected by the 2 reverends. How could I dare to take such a risk? Besides, if he dies, we don't have to do anything. His thousands of years of foundation will be immediately divided by his subordinates. Hiding in the cave's restriction, he can still struggle at death's door for a few days. The cultivator couldn't help but nod. In fact, even without the faint deterrence of Zhenren Zhu and Zhenren Yen, as the demon lord, Luo Mengze wouldn't easily appear until the last moment. This was like the head of Qinsong School. If he appeared to fight the enemy, it would give the outside world the impression that Qinsong School was in a life-and-death situation. Perhaps the entire Donghua continent would be shaken because of this. In the main hall, Ning Chongxian glanced down and said, Yesterday, Senior Apprentice Brother Fan led the other Junior Apprentice Brothers to sweep the 6 islands, but there are still 12 islands in the South Dang Swamp that haven't been cleared. Now that we have occupied Bamboo Island, it's time to turn around and sweep away the demon aura. Before dawn, we must take the entire South Dang Swamp. Fan Chongqing frowned and said, Junior Apprentice Brother Ning, I'm afraid we don't have enough people right now. Originally, he had brought 10 mystic light stage cultivators. Including Zhang Yan, there were only 11 people. Now that 2 people had died in battle, there were only 9 people left. Ning Chongxian smiled faintly and said, What's so difficult about this? Where is Ren Mingyao? Ren Mingyao quickly stood up and said, I'm here. What orders do you have for me, Senior Apprentice Brother? Ning Chongshuan's eyes shone with a sharp light as he said in a low voice, I'll give you 4 hours to sweep the 2 islands in the southwest corner. Do you have any difficulties? Ren Mingyao cupped his hands and said, Since Senior Apprentice Brother is giving me merits, I will gladly accept them. Ning Chongxian turned to look at Zhang Yan and said unquestionably, Zhang Yan, Junior Apprentice Brother Zhang. You go and eliminate the 2 islands in the southeast corner. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and stood up, saying, I'll follow Senior Apprentice Brother's orders. Ren Mingyao's eyes couldn't help but twitch slightly. Everyone's expression was also a little strange. Although Zhang Yan had killed that demon general during the day, in everyone's hearts, they still felt that he was not as good as Ren Mingyao. This kind of impression could not be changed in a short time. However, Ning Chongshuan's action clearly placed the two's strength on the same level. Ning Chongshian nodded slightly and said coldly, "The remaining 8 islands will be handed over to the remaining junior apprentice brothers. If anyone slacks off and does not advance, don't blame me for diminishing his previous merits." When these words came out, everyone's heart trembled. Ning Chongshian flicked his sleeve and a total of 9 lights flew to everyone. These are the sleeve bags bestowed by the sect. There are 3 sets of array flags in each bag. After you destroy the islands, you will arrange them yourselves to prevent them from being taken over by demons again. Do you understand? Everyone hurriedly said yes. Ning Chongshian said no more and flicked his sleeve again. No one dared to hesitate. Streaks of flowing light flashed out of the hall and flew toward the various demon islands in the southern Dang Swamp. Chapter 106. This Nandang Swamp was also foggy at night. White smoke rose everywhere, making it difficult to distinguish north from south. The sky was pitch black and the moon could not be seen. There were strange fish swimming in the swamp, and the sound of splashing could be heard. The barren reefs and rocks outside were shaped like the dorsal fins of water beasts. If an ordinary cultivator were to fly across this lake at night, it would be extremely difficult for them to find an island. They could only rely on their memories to roughly determine the location of the island, and they might have to go around in circles, wasting a lot of time. However, the Yutsong sect disciples on this journey all had their own methods. The 7 disciples who had formed their own path were led by junior brother Qin, who had the map in his hand. This person was good at calculating the journey. He knew exactly where they were, how far they had traveled, and which direction they were in. There was no way he would make a mistake. Ren Mingyao, on the other hand, was different. His 1,000 kills sword plate had the ability to locate qi. Wherever the gold qi was strong and the weapons were gathered, it would definitely be where the demon clan was gathered. As long as he had the right direction, he would be able to find his way there. Furthermore, his white feather hawk was also a spiritual bird. It had the ability to identify the way, so it was very easy for him. Zhang Yan was different. He did not care about the direction. After leaving Ling Shu Flying Palace, he waved his hand and called out, "Where is Ao Tong?" As soon as the words came out, a half-foot-long snake-shaped living creature sprang out of the sleeve. With a shake of its body, it instantly turned into a 60-feet-long demon dragon with golden scales. However, its body was now equipped with a saddle, and in front of it was a cushioned foot. There was also a silver rope around its neck. Zhang Yan stepped on the cushion and pulled up the rope. He said, "We are going to the southeast island of Breath and Anma Island. Do you recognize them?" Ao Tong twisted his body and raised his head. He said, "Old master, I have been searching for food in these 3 pools since I was young. Although I do not know every place, I know how many hidden canals there are, how many strange peaks and rocks there are, and where the demonic woman likes to have fun. I, Ao Tong, remember them all." Zhang Yan frowned and tugged on the rope. He scolded, "Since you already know, then why aren't you leading the way? Why are you wasting your breath?" Being pulled by Xiao Chen, Ao Tong could not help but grin. He stretched out his body and extended his claws. Then he flew into the air. His speed was not slow. As it flew, it muttered, "Master, that Xie Zhongyan is really not a good person. You don't know, I was really bored to death in that beast saddle." Zhang Yan laughed and scolded, "Don't try to trick me. You're so dizzy in the saddle that you can't even see the sun. Do you think I don't know?" When Ao Tong was exposed, he could not help feeling embarrassed. In a moment of carelessness, he had forgotten about the Essence blood contract. As long as Zhang Yan checked, he would know what Ao Tong was thinking. However, Ao Tong's talkative personality could not be changed. After calming down for a while, he could no longer hold it in and started talking non-stop. He was born as an ancient flood dragon and had received many inheritances from his clan since he was young. However, he could not distinguish them clearly and did not care whether they were true or false. He just blurted out everything in his head as if he wanted to pour out all the words that he had been holding in his stomach for the past few days. Fortunately, Zhang Yan was very shrewd. No matter what Ao Tong said, he did not get angry. He still had a faint smile on his face. If it were someone else, they would have already gone crazy and wanted to smack Ao Tong to death. Even so, in the end, Zhang Yan could not help but sigh. I wonder if it was a good or bad thing for me to give you the body transformation pill and remove the bone in your throat. After traveling for an hour, Ao Tong shouted, "Master, look at the flashing light in front. That is Breath Island. This place is the easiest to recognize." Zhang Yan took a few glances and agreed, "Indeed. I wonder which disciple will cultivate here in the future. It will be very impressive." The scenery of the 18 Fiend Islands of southern Dang Marsh was unique. For example, this Breath Island. This island was not large, not more than 1,000 steps away. The island was surrounded by reefs that were half black and half green, glowing with a jade-green light. They were piled up in a ring, encircling the entire island. Further in, the rocks started to show a half-black and half-red color, looking like lava that had just spat out, encircling the island as well. As for the center of the island, it flickered with a golden light. Large rocks that looked like brass covered the ground. Furthermore, these rocks were used to prop up a cave. Even the fog could not conceal the light. To those who did not know, this cave looked like it was made of pure gold. One man and one flood dragon soon arrived. When Zhang Yan took a few glances, he felt it was strange. The caves that he took down during the day were all guarded by fiend soldiers. At the very least, there were at least 100 fiend soldiers. However, this island was completely empty. He did not know if this fiend had a strange temper or if there was something special about it. He asked sullenly, "What kind of fiend is cultivating on this island?" Ao Tong replied, "I do not know about this. There are fiend cultivators killing each other on this southern Dang Marsh's 18 fiend islands every month. I do not know how many masters have changed. The fiend cultivators that can occupy an island are definitely not weak." After saying that, he seemed to feel that he had diminished his own prestige, so he added, "However, they are naturally not as good as Master." Zhang Yan ignored him. With a flip of his hand, he casually picked up 10 talisman and tossed them forward, saying, "Open." The 10 talisman flew forward like flying shuttles. When they reached the depths of the island, they exploded in the air at the same time. It was as if there was a sudden clap of thunder on the ground. Amidst the rumbling sound, the originally thick fog was immediately dispersed by half, revealing the true appearance within. However, the strange thing was that there was still no reaction from the cave despite the loud noise. Zhang Yan could not help but feel a little surprised. Previously, no matter which fiend island it was, the fiend generals on the island would rush out before they even got close. How could it be like this? When someone came knocking on their door, they still did not make a sound. Such a movement naturally alarmed the fiend lord of the island. However, this fiend lord had already found out that several fiend islands in the South Dang Swamp had been destroyed. He felt that he could not afford to offend the Qinsong school, so he holed up and did not come out. After thinking about it, he knew that he would not be able to escape if he stayed here, so he dismissed his troops early. He originally had the intention to escape, but there was something in the cave that he could not give up at the moment. Therefore, he did not leave and wanted to take a few more glances. If Zhang Yan came here again tomorrow, perhaps there would only be an empty cave left. Now that he heard the sudden explosions outside, he knew that something was wrong. He did not know how many people the other party had, so he simply holed up in the cave and refused to come out. Seeing this, Zhang Yan could not help but laugh coldly. He took out the cloud-filling bowl from his sleeve and formed a hand seal. He flipped it in the air and the scarlet clouds instantly poured out like water bursting through a dam. They rolled around the island. The clouds looked as light as cotton, but once they came into contact with flesh and blood, they would become as heavy as mercury. Once someone was trapped in it, they would feel as if they had sunk into the bottom of the sea, unable to move at all. They could only be slaughtered by others. The fiend lord knew how powerful this was, and his face turned pale. He knew that he could not escape today. A black wind swept by, and this fiend lord flew into the sky. He faced Zhang Yan from afar and said with hatred, "I, Huang Peng, cultivated on this island and have never offended your Qinsong school. Why do you want to kill me? What is the reason?" Zhang Yan raised his head and looked at this fiend lord. He saw that this fiend lord was wearing a long robe and was dressed like a middle-aged scholar. He did not look evil like the other fiend lords, and his cultivation was only at the first level of the mystic light realm, similar to his own. Fan Changqing had destroyed 6 fiend islands today. Although most of them were mystic light realm cultivators, for some reason, most of them were ignorant and couldn't even speak properly. Now that he had encountered someone who could speak clearly, Zhang Yan replied, "So it's fellow Taoist Huang. I heard that in the ancient times, heavenly demons ran amok and treated us humans like ants, swallowing them as they pleased. At that time, did they ever talk about right or wrong? If it wasn't for the powerful cultivators of the human race fighting with the heaven beasts for 1,000 years, shattering the land and shattering the pillars in the sky, giving us a chance to survive, the human race would probably still be food in the mouths of the fiend race. You ask me what is the reason? I'll tell you that this is the reason." After saying that, he didn't say anything else and pointed out with his finger. The star sword orb turned into a ray of blue light and slashed down. Huang Peng's complexion couldn't help but change when he saw how sharp that light was. He twisted his body and revealed his true form. It was a black eel that was 10 meters long. A clear, profound light flashed and enveloped his entire body. Then it shrunk downwards and he actually dodged it. Zhang Yan controlled the sword orb to chase after him, turning left and right. However, the light on Huang Peng's body seemed to be a bit strange. Not only was it very fast, it could also pass through the cracks in the rocks. It was extremely slippery. There were a few times when it looked like it was going to hit him, but it was dodged by a hair's breadth. Zhang Yan could only trap it in a certain area. Zhang Yan sneered and pointed forward with his other hand. A ray of blue and green light also flew out. The 2 rays of light, one blue and one green, flew in front and behind. After circling a few times, the range of movement that Huang Peng could move became smaller and smaller, completely blocking the way. Seeing that there was no way to escape, Huang Peng made a strange cry in his throat. He curled his body into a ball, and the mysterious light on his body shone brightly. Then he spun like a top, allowing the Rui spirit shuttle and the star sword orb to hit his body. However, when these 2 ferocious objects encountered the mysterious light that was as clear as fresh water, they slid to the sides as if they were slashing on a ball of grease. Seeing this, Zhang Yan couldn't help but let out a "ha." Taking advantage of this gap, Huang Peng stretched his body, let out a shrill scream, and rushed forward, turning into a ray of clear light and flashing away. He originally thought that he could escape this time, and was using all his strength to fly forward. Who knew that when he had only gone a few dozen feet away, there was suddenly a golden light coming down from the top of his head. He didn't even have time to make a sound before he was wrapped in it. The 2 mysterious lights that were like fire and gold twisted up and down, grinding away most of the flesh and blood on his body. At this moment, with a clang sound, something fell out of it. The golden and red lights faded, and the figure of Zhang Yan appeared. He raised his hand, and the jade talisman flew out, collecting a trace of essence blood. He took 2 steps forward, bent down, and picked up the thing. He thought in his heart, "I don't know what it is, even my golden fire mystic light can't grind it." When he pinched it with his hand, it felt smooth and soft. He didn't know what it was made of. It looked like gold but not gold, like silk but not silk. It was light in his hand as if it had no weight. When he looked carefully, he found that there was a line of writing on it. Chapter 107. The situation changes once again. Zhang Yan took a few glances and discovered that this line of words was written in etchings. There were at least 300 to 500 words densely packed together. Apart from that, there were also quite a few notes on the side that could be read. It was just that the entire technique was arranged vertically and horizontally, making it look very messy. Only after carefully looking at it a few times did he find its origins. This technique was called the true calming carefree technique, and it was a technique that focused on hiding and escaping. The protective clear light that the eel demon Huang Peng had used earlier was also recorded in this technique. This technique could even block the divine Rui shuttle and the stellar sword orb. Zhang Yan couldn't help but read on out of curiosity. After a cursory glance, he couldn't help but sigh. This Huang Peng's foundation was still shallow after all. He had only read the words in the notes, so he didn't understand half of it and couldn't understand the true profoundness within. If he had really cultivated this technique, he might not have been able to do anything to him today. However, when he continued to read on, he frowned. This was because this technique was not complete. It was obvious that there were still some areas that were lacking, and it wasn't just here. The most crucial areas were also the same. In this way, the originally brilliant technique had suddenly dropped by quite a few levels, which inevitably made people feel regretful. After roughly reading through it, Zhang Yan once again pondered over the gold leaf-like item in his hand. Looking at its shape and color, in his memory, there seemed to be a book that had mentioned something similar. After thinking about it with rapt attention, a thought flashed through his mind, and he thought to himself, could this be the German iron plaque? The German script iron plaque wasn't a powerful magic treasure. Instead, it was refined by a cultivator called Shantagua in his free time over 1,000 years ago. This item didn't have much power, but it could make a copy of any text or picture in a book within a radius of half a foot. Whether it was true or not, he would know after trying it out. Zhang Yan casually took out a pen and paper and wrote 2 words on it. Then, he used the item to shine it, and he saw 2 words appear on the surface that was as smooth as a mirror before long. He chuckled and put the item away along with the pen and paper. He raised his head and looked at the cave. This Huang Peng had this thing in her hand. He wondered if she had accidentally barged into some immortal abode. Maybe there was something left behind. Thinking of this, he walked inside. When he broke into the cave, he found that it was a stone room about 30 feet in size. The layout was rough and simple. Except for a jade bed and a few clay pots, there was nothing else. However, it was quite clean, and there was no smell or dirt. After taking a stroll, he found a hidden side door on the southeast wall. It was hard to notice if he did not look carefully. He smiled and pushed the door open. However, as soon as he entered, a look of surprise appeared on his face. There was a lush green vine growing at the center of this stone room. Its appearance was coiled and twisted, and it was vigorous like a crouching dragon with its back arched up, giving it an extraordinary aura. What was even more strange was that this green vine was covered with characters that were as fine as ants. Zhang Yan moved closer to take a closer look and couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. The source text of the Dingjin Xiaoyao scripture came from here. Of course, this was not deliberately engraved on the green vine by someone who had nothing better to do. The entire incantation was inserted into the seed of this green vine by an unknown person with great magical power. As the green vine gradually grew, after a certain number of years, dense characters appeared on the branches. This kind of scene was quite strange. It was also the first time he saw it, and he couldn't help but be amazed. No wonder the sentence patterns in the German iron plaque were disordered. It turned out that as the vine grew, the order gradually rose in a spiral, and this Huang Peng didn't know how to sort it out, so it appeared unusually messy. Since the main text was here, this time Zhang Yan paid attention to it. However, as the green vine reached the top, the contents stopped here. At the end, there was a glistening red, heavy, and plump fruit. It looked like the melon was about to ripen and fall. Zhang Yan pondered in his heart. This kind of method was like the method of Taihao School, one of the 10 great mysterious sects. He heard that Taihao School had a green emperor divine tree. When passing down the method, they would let the true disciples go up the divine tree to pluck the seed, and then use the method of the school to guide them to plant a tree. When the tree fruit ripened and fell to the ground, they could find the incantation from within. It was said that every disciple received a different method. Although the strength of the method was different, it was the most suitable for their own cultivation. The other 9 sects of the mysterious sects couldn't compare in this aspect. Originally, that eel demon Huang Peng was waiting here because this fruit was about to ripen. He wanted to take the last incantation and leave. He didn't expect that at this time, Zhang Yan would come to kill him, and in the end he died. Zhang Yan thought to himself. This method was very profound, and he couldn't let others benefit from it. However, he still needed to go to another island and couldn't wait here for long. After thinking for a while, he walked out of the cave and took out a set of formation flags from his sleeve. Then he took out a jade strip and looked at the method to set up the formation. After that he got up and flew to the east, south, west, and north of the island. After that, he set up the formation flags and opened the restriction. This way, aside from those who knew the incantation to open the formation, no one would be able to enter this place. Furthermore, it was impossible for the disciples of Qinsong School to come here at this time. After he killed all the demonic cultivators on Mon Island, the fruit should be about to ripen. Seeing that everything was set up properly, Xiaochen didn't delay any longer. He called Ao Tong out and stepped on Ao Tong's back. Then he pulled on the rope and headed for another demonic island. Mon Island was not far from Rest Island. After flying for about an hour, Xiaochen could see it in the distance. Just at this time, a beam of light flew up from the island. However, the color was not pure, and it was filled with a demonic aura. Seeing Zhang Yan coming over on a flood dragon, the owner of that beam of light seemed to be startled. After a pause, he actually turned around and fled. That demonic cultivator was not slow. If Zhang Yan chased after him now, he wouldn't need much time. However, he was worried about the green vine scarlet pike. Since the other party was willing to let him pass, he didn't have the mood to chase after him. When he arrived above Mon Island, he circled in 4 directions, threw down the formation flags, and left. After Zhang Yan left, that beam of demonic light shrunk back. The light withdrew, revealing a half-foot-tall old man with white hair and eyebrows. When he saw the restriction formation flags laid on the island he cultivated on, he couldn't help but feel bitter. He thought to himself, this person came from the direction of Rest Island. It looks like fellow Taoist Huang is done for. Now that Qinsong School is surrounding my Jade Blood Pool's demonic cultivator, I can't afford to offend them. Why don't I find another place to cultivate? It's better than wasting my hundreds of years of effort. After saying that, he covered his face with his sleeves, and a beam of profound light wrapped around him. Then he headed southeast. When Zhang Yan returned to Flickering Breath Island once more, it took him another 2 hours to go back and forth. Originally, he had come out at the Z hour. Now, it was the middle of the Yin hour, and the sky was slightly brighter. Xiaochen descended from Ao Tong's back and took out a jade strip. Then, he chanted the incantation and opened the restriction. He walked into the cave, but when he raised his head, the scene before him startled him. The green vine had already withered and turned gray. It was miserable, no longer as majestic as it was before. Furthermore, there was a ripe fruit on the ground. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "You came at the right time. 1 loss, 1 gain. Indeed, everything is predestined." If he had gone to chase after the fleeing demonic cultivator, he would have returned later. At that time, the seed might have taken root and sprouted. If that happened, who knew how many years he would have to wait to obtain the incantation again? Xiaochen raised his hand, and the fruit flew into his hand. Then he carefully separated the flesh, revealing the core. With a glance, he saw that there were many small, densely packed characters on the core. He knew that it was the most crucial part of the incantation. He could not help but rejoice. With a flick of his wrist, he put the fruit into his sleeve. Since he had obtained the incantation, there was no need for him to stay here any longer. He strode out of the cave, waved his hand, and put Ao Tong back. Then he lifted the escape light and returned to Bamboo Island. It was not until early morning that Zhang Yan returned to Bamboo Island. However, at this moment, he felt that the atmosphere was very different from when he left. Looking down from the sky, he saw that there were actually 2 flying spiritual palaces on the island. He did not know which core formation cultivator from the sect had come. He looked at the cloud and identified Fan Chongqing's flying palace. Then he descended and walked in. When he entered the main hall, he saw that Ning Chongxian was not in the main seat. There was only a middle-aged cultivator with a black beard that reached his chest sitting there with his eyes closed. The rest of the people were also nowhere to be seen. It seemed that he was the first one to return. Sensing that Zhang Yan had come in, the middle-aged cultivator's eyes opened slightly. He asked in a deep voice, "Which one are you?" Zhang Yan did not know who he was, but looking at this person's imposing manner and surging magic power, he knew at a glance that he was a core formation cultivator. So, he replied, "Disciple Zhang Yan. You are the true disciple that martial nephew Qi came out of the devil's cave?" Unexpectedly, after hearing his name, this middle-aged cultivator opened his eyes at once. His face darkened and he said, "Cultivation should be done step by step and build a solid foundation. How can you take these crooked paths? If it wasn't for the sect caring about you, how could you be where you are today? You must remember, in cultivation, you must avoid short-sightedness and impatience. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You can leave first. I have other arrangements for tomorrow." After saying that, he did not wait for Zhang Yan to speak and waved his hand to drive him out. After Zhang Yan walked out of the flying palace, he felt a little puzzled. He did not know who this person was and why he suddenly reprimanded him. At this moment, he saw a figure. When he looked up, he saw Fan Chongqing standing not far away and waving at him. He immediately took a few steps forward and walked up to him. When he came close, Fan Chongqing smiled at him and said, "Junior Martial Brother Zhang, were you also reprimanded by Martial Uncle Ge? Don't worry, this is his temper. He did not come for you." Martial Uncle Ge? Zhang Yan's mind turned and he remembered this person. This person was a disciple of an elder in the Duzhen Palace. He had cultivated for nearly 300 years and was of the same generation as the few spiritual masters. He was usually old-fashioned and strict. He always talked about rules and principles. His way of doing things was similar to Zhuang Bufan. But he still asked, "If Martial Uncle Ge is here, then where is Senior Martial Brother Ning?" Fan Chongqing sighed slightly and said in a low voice, "The sect arranged for Senior Martial Brother Ning to go back. They said that he had another important task, so they sent Martial Uncle Ge to replace him. I don't know what happened." Chapter 72, The Situation Changes Again. Chapter 108. 96 Translator, Transin Editor, Transin. Although Fan Chongqing said so, he was well aware of the real reason why Ning Chongxian was summoned. Chinese network in Qinsong School, it was not easy for disciples to make contributions, but the Battle of the Three Pools gave them a great opportunity. Therefore, many elders hoped that their disciples could go there and get some credit. Moreover, there was the support of the sect, so how could they not be arrogant? But with Ning Chongshuan's arrival, the whole of the south was under the control of Qinsong School overnight, and according to the situation, he could directly kill his way to the eagle-perching continent with the people he had at hand. With the strength of a Grade 2 core and a Shen weapon, it was very likely that he could defeat them. But the deeper they went, the stronger the strength of the demon cultivators, and the stronger the resistance. After passing the eagle-perching continent, it was the inner lake of the Jade Blood Pool. Originally, they could easily get a share of the credit, but they had to fight to the death. How could the elders be willing? Those ordinary disciples were fine, but they could not let the disciples that they had painstakingly cultivated go to die, right? Therefore, after receiving the secret report from a few disciples, the elders discussed and went to find a few Taoist masters to complain. In order to appease them, they decided to send someone to replace Ning Chongxian. However, Ning Chongxian had never been willing to submit to others. If they arranged for someone else, they might not be able to subdue him. Therefore, they first arranged for him to be a deacon in the Merit Courtyard and temporarily invited him back. Then they sent Gu Shua, a cultivator at the second tier of core transformation, to oversee Bamboo Island. Fan Chongqing and Zhang Yan chatted for a while. Before they parted, Fan Chongqing thought in his heart, "Senior brother Ning has been summoned back, but tomorrow senior brother Fong Hong will come. This person is spiritual Master Zhu's disciple. Although I am not afraid of others coming to make things difficult for me, but now I am not the one in charge. Junior brother Zhang will inevitably suffer a loss." So he coughed and said, "Intentionally or unintentionally." The elders in the sect said that Gu Shua is calm and prudent, and can take on great responsibilities. Then he left without looking back. Although the content of this sentence was not much, it clearly explained the cause and effect. Zhang Yan secretly pondered for a moment and said, "Doesn't this mean that senior brother Ning is impatient and cannot be placed in an important position?" Since he had called senior brother Ning back and sent Marshal Uncle Gu Shuo over to take charge of the situation, with Fan Chongqing keeping such a low profile, there was no need to think too much. He knew that there was no one to take care of him for the time being. Not only that, there might even be people coming to make things difficult for him. However, he didn't really care about this. Whether he had it or not, he still had to walk his own path. Why should he worry about it? He was only hurting his own spirit. He let out a carefree smile and flew back to his courtyard in a streak of light. Just as he entered the room, he suddenly sensed something. Turning around, he saw a golden howling lake sword flying in his direction. With a wave of his hand, he took the letter and flicked his sleeve, closing the door. Then, he took out the letter and read it. He was surprised to find that the letter actually wrote about the opening and closing method of the Jing Luo formation flag. With this method, he could freely enter and exit Bamboo Island without being trapped here. Although there was no signature on the letter, the handwriting was sharp like a sword, and the strokes were sharp like swords. With a slight break, he knew that it was Ning Chongxian's handwriting. Zhang Yan looked thoughtful. Ning Chongxian's previous actions actually did not make sense. He came in a hurry in the middle of the night, and it seemed that he only wanted to take down Bamboo Island. After that, instead of being invited back, it seemed more like he had left after accomplishing his mission. There seemed to be some hidden meaning behind it, and giving him this incantation seemed to mean that he understood something. However, Zhang Yan felt that the clues he knew were too little, and he couldn't make any more deductions. If he had the time to think about it, he might as well spend more time on the carefree technique of real form. At least if he learned this incantation, even if he encountered danger in the future, he would always be able to escape. Thus, he cleared his mind of all distracting thoughts, sat down, and closed his eyes to comprehend the incantation. When it was 7 in the morning, the sound of a bell rang from the Flying Spirit Pivot Palace at the top of the mountain. This was a gathering of all the disciples. Zhang Yan opened his eyes, put away the incantation, and flew towards the main hall. At this moment, Gu Shuo was sitting on the main seat in the main hall. Aside from him, there was another core formation cultivator called Fang Hong. This person's appearance was normal, and his nose was slightly sunken. However, his bones were thick, his back was thick, and his aura was powerful. The pressure he gave off was even stronger than Marshal Uncle Gu, who was sitting on the main seat. After Zhang Yan entered the hall, many unfamiliar disciples arrived. Adding on the people who went to attack the Demon Island in the Southern Lake last night, there were already 48 Mystic Light Realm disciples standing in the hall. When all the disciples had arrived, Gu Shishu swept a few glances downwards, stroked his beard and said, "Zhu Zhu Shizhu, although the southern Dongzhe has been cleared, there is still the eagle-perching continent in front of us. From today onwards, we will attack this place. Although there are 4 core transformation demon cultivators on this island, I, Fang Shizhu and Fan Shizhu will be able to hold them off. The rest of the disciples will take advantage of the gap and attack fiercely. Remember the 4 words: attack slowly and slowly. Do not underestimate the enemy and advance rashly. After a few days, after slowly wearing down their wings, we can take this place in one go." Everyone hurriedly agreed. Gu Shuo seemed to have thought of something and looked towards Zhang Yan. He said in a deep voice, "Since junior brother Zhang is a disciple of the Danding Institute's Zhou Academy, there is no need for you to go to this battle. I have a pill refining room in the hall with many ingredients. Go there and refine some pills for us." Fang Hong, who was sitting on the side, had been silent the entire time. At this moment he suddenly said, "Why don't we let him follow me? He will be able to make some contributions." Gu Shuo shook his head and said, "Junior brother Zhang, I heard that when you open your meridian, your pulse is only low grade, and you still need to go to the demon's room to increase your cultivation. Even if you reach the mystic light realm, it is only forcefully increased. It is not comparable to the mystic light realm of normal disciples, and fighting is not his forte. This time, we will take a certain amount of pills from the Danding Institute, and it is not inexhaustible. With him refining pills for us, we won't have to worry about not being able to make ends meet. Zhang Yan's accomplishments in the past 2 days were actually quite impressive among the disciples, but Gu Shuo purposely glossed over it. It was obvious that he had other plans. Fang Hong didn't understand Gu Shuo's plans, but he could only smile and say, "Martial uncle is right." However, he said in his heart, "What a pity, if this Zhang Yan was under my command, I could casually send him to fight with any demon general. No matter how lucky he is, there would still be a time when he would fail. At that time, I could silently eliminate him and sell senior brother Zhuang a favor. I'll let him roam around for a few more days, he will definitely find his mistakes." Gu Shuo then said to Zhang Yan, "Junior brother Zhang, if you do well, I will naturally write a mark on your book of merits. You won't feel wronged. Go." With a wave of his sleeve, Zhang Yan felt a surge of power surging up his body. He didn't resist, allowing this surge of power to pile him up. After leaving the flying hall, he circled a few times in the air and landed in a pill room. This pill room was 20 steps in front and behind. The shelves on both sides were filled with rare medicinal ingredients. On the south side, there was a praying mat, and in the middle, there was a 3-legged pill furnace that was half the height of a person. This furnace had auspicious beast cauldron handles, dragon and tiger patterns, and was overflowing with spiritual energy. With one look, one could tell that this was a rare spiritual tool for pill refining. Just by looking at the layout of this place, Zhang Yan could tell that this Gu Shuo was definitely an expert in pill refining. In fact, before Gu Shuo cultivated, he was a cauldron boy in a mortal Taoist temple. Later, he was accepted into the Qinsong school. Although he learned the best cultivation method, pill refining was still his hobby. In his spare time, he loved to refine some pills at home. In Qinsong school, Zhou Chongju's pill refining skills were the best, so he often went there to ask for advice. But Zhou Chongju never paid attention to him. However, this time, he met Zhang Yan, Zhou Chongju's direct disciple. Gu Shuo had the purpose of observing the secrets of pill refining, so how could he bear to let Zhang Yan go to the battlefield to fight? As for the open and secret fights between the few spiritual masters, he didn't take it to heart. As Zhang Yan was observing in the hall, a spark suddenly flew out from outside and threw it into the pill furnace. With a boom, the charcoal under the pill furnace was ignited. Zhang Yan couldn't help but smile. It seemed that if he didn't refine some decent pills, this senior Uncle Go would definitely not let him leave. That was fine. Since he could also make a contribution in the refining hall, and there were people who were willing to let him practice with these rare medicinal ingredients, why should he resist? Moreover, this pill furnace was a spirit tool, so he didn't need to look after the fire. In this way, he still had a lot of time to cultivate, so why not? It was just that this Gu Shuo should also be knowledgeable. Using the ordinary pills recorded in the pill manual to deal with him might not be able to enter his eyes, so he needed to take an unconventional approach. Zhang Yan went over everything he knew a few times in his mind. After a while, a trace of a smile floated on his face, and he said, "Got it." He reached into his sleeve and took out the bottle of vitality refining pills that he obtained from the Blood Soul sect disciple. The method of making pills needed one main ingredient as a guide, and many other ingredients as a supplement. The main ingredient was the most important, and most of the effects of the pills would come from this ingredient. The main ingredient was usually a pill that the pill refiner had chosen beforehand and used a unique method to make. Therefore, even if others could learn the pill refinement method, they wouldn't be able to learn how to make the main ingredient. Although Zhang Yan didn't have the main ingredient, he could use the bottle of vitality refining pills in his hand as a substitute. One had to know that each vitality refining pill contained the essence of at least 100 beast cultivators. If a normal cultivator didn't know the method, they would explode from the energy of the pill. Even a disciple of the Blood Soul sect, if they were only at the mystic light realm, would probably only need a few months to refine this pill. If he used this pill as the main ingredient and made a pill according to Zhou Chongju's secret recipe, the effects would definitely be shocking. With a plan in mind, Zhang Yan went to pick out many medicinal ingredients and put them to the side. Because he couldn't overdo it after the fire was lit, he had to wait patiently. Only when it was suitable would he open the furnace and start to refine the pill. About half a day later, he saw that the furnace was getting hotter and hotter, and he threw in the medicinal ingredients that he had prepared. The effects of this pill were all on the essence cloud pill, so he didn't put much importance on the supplementary ingredients. As long as the effects didn't conflict, he didn't care. Although he wasted a lot of it, it wasn't his own. Therefore, he didn't feel bad for Gu Shuo at all. This furnace was indeed worthy of being a treasure. The moment the medicinal ingredients were thrown in, the fire started to burn fiercely. 2 hours later, Zhang Yan opened the side lid of the furnace and took out the essence cloud pill. With a wave of his finger, he cut off 1/5 of the pill and threw it into the furnace. At the same time, he blew a long breath into the furnace. Under the pressure of his spiritual energy, the flame at the bottom of the alchemy furnace was first suppressed. As he turned his hand and closed the side lid, a loud muffled sound came from within the furnace. The entire alchemy furnace seemed to shake, and the flame fiercely shot up more than half a foot high. For a moment, the fire inside the furnace was scorching hot, and it was as red as blood, as if the entire alchemy furnace was going to melt. Zhang Yan sat on the praying mat and looked at it calmly. After a while, the fire slowly subsided, and a dense essence qi was produced in the furnace. For a moment, the essence qi was boiling, and the room was filled with a strange fragrance. Zhang Yan knew that this essence qi was the essence of the main ingredient and the supplementary ingredients. However, it wasn't complete yet. There was still one last crucial step. This step was called unifying the pill. It was the most important step in the entire alchemy method, and it was also a test of the alchemist's ability. Whether the medicinal efficacy of a furnace of pills could be evenly distributed into 10 pills or 100 pills, it all depended on this step. However, even if the medicinal efficacy was sufficient, it didn't mean that the smaller the number of pills, the greater the medicinal efficacy. This was because there was a limit to how much medicinal efficacy each pill could contain. If there was too little, it would be a waste of the ingredients, and the medicinal efficacy would be too strong. However, if there was too much, not only would the medicinal efficacy be thin, but the medicinal efficacy of the supplementary ingredients could also be overrun, resulting in the entire furnace being wasted. Zhang Yan didn't care so much. This pure vitality pill was enough to refine 10 furnaces of pills, and he had 2 bottles in his hands. Wasting a little was nothing. He used all his strength to urge the real fire, and with a flick of his sleeve, he opened the lock on the lid of the furnace. With a bang, the medicinal efficacy rushed out of the lid, and a mass of essence qi rushed out. If he didn't seize this opportunity, it wouldn't take more than a few breaths for this essence qi to completely dissipate. Zhang Yan calmly spat out a mouthful of air and wrapped it around the essence qi. Then, he stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. Several streams of medicinal liquid that were as dense as pure syrup sprayed out, turning into hundreds of drops that scattered into the essence qi. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Zhang Yan withdrew the ball of qi, and dozens of pills fell down like rain. Taking the porcelain bottle that he had prepared in advance, he reached out and scooped up all the pills. It took him 3 or 4 porcelain bottles in a row to fill up. There was no need to count. Zhang Yan knew that he had condensed a total of 98 pills this time, but among them, there were 42 pills that were useless. However, this was after all the first time he had tried it after leaving Zhou. Being able to achieve a success rate of 50%, Zhang Yan was already quite satisfied. Taking a pill and sniffing it, he felt as if his brain had inhaled an abundant amount of yuan qi. He smiled confidently. With these bottles of pills, he wasn't afraid that Gu Shuo wouldn't give him a credit. Chapter 109. On the eagle-perching continent, the battles continued for more than 10 days. Under the fierce attacks of the Qinsong school, the Yao on this island were forced to retreat and many groups were slaughtered. Chinese network. Although there were 4 core transformation realm demon cultivators in charge of the land test, they were all blocked by Gu Shuo, Fan Chongqing, and Fang Hong during the battle, so they could only sit and watch as their subordinates were slaughtered by the Dark Azure sect cultivators. However, the Qinsong school cultivators felt that the time wasn't right and didn't want to force the core transformation Yao cultivators too much. Therefore, every time they had the upper hand, they would leave and wait 2 or 3 days later when the Yao gathered again. After repeating this a few times, the disciples of the Qinsong school were all very satisfied. If they only went out to collect merit, how could they be so satisfied now? Now that they had senior brother Zhao Nan, who had a high cultivation, and the help of their fellow sect members, they didn't feel tired at all when facing those Yao cultivators who only had some shallow Dao skills. They only felt that their hands were getting soft from killing every day. Over the past few days, more and more disciples had gathered in the Yutsong sect. Several spiritual masters and disciples of the elders had also arrived. Although there were many Yao cultivators on the eagle-perching continent, they couldn't handle this and retreated into the depths of the continent. The disciples of the Qinsong school had to go deep into the continent to find these Yao cultivators, but they didn't care too much. It wouldn't be too late to take down the eagle-perching continent after all the disciples had collected enough merit. On this day, after killing the Yao cultivators again, the 3 flying palaces formed a triangle in the sky. In the middle, nearly 200 mystic light realm cultivators formed a 5-colored ray of light and returned to Bamboo Island. Right now, the 18 islands of the southern swamp were all covered with formation flags and the restrictions were connected to each other to disperse the evil aura. The clouds above the southern swamp were slowly dispersing. At this moment, the sun was setting and the surface of the lake was glistening. The spirit beasts and birds were flying around, giving off the atmosphere of a celestial being. There were many beautiful female cultivators among the mystic light realm cultivators, and a few of them were even protected. They were all disciples of spiritual Master Qin from the glittering jewel grotto heaven. This perfected Qin had a special status, so he did not care about the background of his disciples. In this battle of the 3 pools, there were disciples from the glittering jewel grotto heaven in the surging waves lake and the jade blood pool. Among the female crowns, the leader was a woman in her 20s. She had white teeth and skin, and her eyes were charming and affectionate. At this moment, she made a request with her jade-like hand, and a long rainbow appeared in the sky. She said happily, "Senior Martial Brother Mo, the pill you gave me today is really good. When I use the Man-E sword, I feel that it is much smoother than before." Standing next to her was a handsome man. He was called Mo Tianhua, and he was the disciple of Elder Qi. He couldn't help but smile when he heard this and said, "Junior Martial Sister Yang Ying, this pill is called the biochemical pill, and it was created by a disciple of the Pill Cauldron Courtyard." Martial Uncle Go also praised it after seeing it and personally gave him credit. It's a pity that one cauldron of pills can only be made every 3 days, and one cauldron only produces 20 to 30 pills. Not everyone can get one. Yang Ying understood and said, "So it's a disciple of the Pill Cauldron Courtyard. No wonder. With the effect of this pill, it's not wrong to give him credit." Mo Tianhua snorted lightly and said in disdain, "This person is also at the mystic light realm, but his foundation is weak and can't compare to us. The mystic light he cultivates is not pure, so he won't be able to reach the Tao in the future." That day, Gushua said in front of everyone that Zhang Yan's Fa Li was weak. Although the cultivators who saw Zhang Yan kill the demon general did not think much of it, they thought that Gushua might have a deeper meaning, so no one made it public. However, the disciples who heard the rumors later all believed it to be true. It had to be known that if one didn't have a high-level cultivation method and didn't have the help of a heavenly treasure, even if they managed to increase their cultivation, their future achievements would be limited, and they wouldn't be able to compete with those of the same generation. Mo Tianhua only knew that there was a disciple in the Flying Palace who was very talented in the Tao of alchemy. However, this kind of alchemist was usually someone who had no hope in cultivation, so he naturally looked down on them. Thus, his words were full of contempt. Yang Ying blinked her beautiful eyes and said, "Senior Martial Brother Mo, although the Tao of alchemy can't lead to immortality, we cultivators can't leave it either. This person's attainments in the Tao of alchemy are so profound. If he takes over the Tao of Zhou Institute in the future, the sect will definitely not mistreat him." Mo Tianhua wasn't stupid. Seeing that Yang Ying's words were always related to the Tao of alchemy, he somewhat understood in his heart. He smiled and said, "Junior martial sister Yang, do you have any difficulties that you need my help with?" Yang Ying originally had this intention, so she generously admitted it. Senior martial brother guessed correctly. Senior martial brother, you also know that I'm a disciple of Teacher Qin. I don't know what grudges I have with Zhou Institute and Teacher Qin, but there was a strict order that I'm not allowed to ask for alchemy from the Danding Institute's disciples. However, my rainbow shadow crossing moon technique has reached a bottleneck, and I need a clear glass pill to cleanse my internal organs, nourish my yuan yin, and regulate my qi. Now that this senior martial brother is good at alchemy, I intend to ask him to help me refine this pill. However, I'm afraid that it'll be inappropriate if teacher finds out, so I'd like to trouble senior martial brother to help me. Mo Tianhua secretly thought that he was originally a disciple of Elder Qin. If he appeared, that Danding Institute disciple would have to give him some face. It was just a small matter. He immediately patted his chest and said, "This is not difficult. I'll go on behalf of junior martial sister Yang. I don't think a small pill master would dare to disobey." Seeing that he agreed so readily, Yang Ying couldn't help but be happy. She curtsied and said, "Senior martial brother is really generous. Then junior martial sister will entrust this matter to senior martial brother." Mo Tianhua waved his hand and said, "We're all fellow disciples, no need to be so polite." Yang Ying said, "If I can get this pill and cleanse my rainbow shadow mysterious light, junior martial sister's cultivation will definitely not be below junior martial sister Feng Yao. I heard that at Surging Waves Lake, she was in the limelight." As she said this, her tone couldn't help but contain jealousy. When Mo Tianhua heard this, he knew that the disciples of their sect were secretly competing with each other. It wasn't convenient for him to say anything, so he just smiled and didn't say anything. Yang Ying sighed again and said, "I heard that the disciples of aristocratic families are coming out in large numbers. They are all amazing and outstanding people. In the battle at Surging Waves Lake this time, there were even many senior martial brothers who we usually only hear of but never see in person. And among us, I'm afraid that other than senior martial brother Ren, there's no one else who can provoke this scene." Hearing this, Mo Tianhua was a little unconvinced and said, "In my line of disciples, there are two senior martial brothers, Huang Fuzhou and Yu Chongyang. Senior martial brother Huang has obtained the ancient celestial method, and senior martial brother Yu is even more powerful. There's a divine object choosing its master. Now they're both preparing for the sect competition in 2 months and are in closed-door cultivation. That's why they haven't come here. Otherwise, they wouldn't lose to those disciples of aristocratic families." Yang Ying gave him a flirtatious look and said softly, "Actually, senior martial brother Mo isn't bad either." Her look made Mo Tianhua's heart burn. Who in the sect didn't know that if one could become Dao companions with the disciples of Zhenren Qin, there would be countless benefits. Although it would not be bad if one could obtain the celestial concubines of the Zhenren Qin, but the disciples of Zhenren Qin were proper Taoists. The difference in status between the two was like heaven and earth. Naturally, they couldn't be compared. He laughed and said, "Junior martial sister Yang must be joking. How can I compare to those two senior martial brothers? But I, Mo Tianhua, have been taught the great Tao by my master. I think I also have some skills." At this moment, on Bamboo Island, Zhang Yan sat on the praying mat and closed his eyes to meditate. For the past 10 days, other than concocting pills, he had been practicing the real form of carefree scripture. Although this scripture didn't take a difficult path, there were many aspects that were unique and there was no way to find a way forward. Fortunately, he had the broken jade in his hand. He first understood the scripture in the scripture, and then he started to practice it. Walking through the broken jade was like going through a round of practice. Any difficult juncture was nothing in front of him, and he would pass it with a light pile. After practicing for 3 days, he shook his body and a shadow that looked exactly like him appeared on top of his head. This shadow was formed by a ray of light, and its aura was exactly the same as his own. In times of danger, he could give up this shadow to block the magical weapons and flying swords, and he could hide his body and escape. However, his cultivation wasn't deep yet, so this shadow was still a bit erratic. According to the real form of carefree scripture, he still needed to use his own blood essence to condense it for a few days, until this shadow became as solid as a real person. Even if it was attacked by a saber or an axe, it would still look like a living person. However, this scripture was only the most basic scripture in the real form of carefree scripture. The last part of the real form of carefree scripture actually required one to be above the core transformation realm in order to practice it. At that stage, there were many parts that he couldn't understand. Right at this moment, a muffled sound entered his ears. He looked up and saw a blazing flame inside the cauldron. He felt a slight tremble under his seat, and he knew that the cauldron was about to be completed. After refining this pill a few times, he was already familiar with it. He waved his sleeve and opened the lid. In a split second, essence energy surged and filled the air, and the room was filled with a strange fragrance. Zhang Yan patted the cauldron, and the medicinal liquid that flew out rolled in the essence energy, then each of them turned into a pill and fell down. He caught all the pills and put them into a bottle. He couldn't help but smile. Good, 108 pills. The number of pills I have now is enough to last me for half a month. Every time he refined a cauldron, Gu Shua had to record his merit. He told the outside world that he refined a cauldron every 3 days because he didn't want people to think that this thing was too cheap. Moreover, during these 3 days, he wasn't afraid of people coming to disturb him, so he could cultivate without worry. However, he didn't turn a deaf ear to the outside world these days. Ever since Ning Chongxian taught him the method to open and close the Jing Luo formation flag, he began to pay attention to the demons in the eagle-perching continent. With one look, he really felt that something was wrong. These demons seemed to be retreating every day and had already given up a large area of land, but under careful observation, he found that there seemed to be a pattern, as if they were deliberately luring the Qinsong school disciples to go deeper. Zhang Yan thought to himself, old demon Luo Mengzi has been here for hundreds of years, how could it be easy? Since I can't go into battle, I naturally don't need to follow the flying palace every day. When I master the escape technique in the true form scripture, I can deceive Gu Shua. When they go to attack the eagle-perching continent, I can stay on Bamboo Knot Island and avoid a crisis. Chapter 110. In the depths of the eagle-perching continent, the Howling Peak was the last peak occupied by the demon cultivators. It was the abode of one of the core formation demon cultivators, Master Jin Tan. There was nowhere else to retreat, so no matter how hard the Qinsong school attacked, they never gave up on this place. Chinese network. The 4 core formation great demons that originally occupied their own areas on the continent had all abandoned their abodes and gathered here due to the pressure from the Qinsong school. Master Jin Tan, who was 30 feet tall and had golden hair and golden eyebrows, stood at the top of the mountain and looked forward. He sighed and said, "In 2 days, the Qinsong school will attack us again. I heard that there are 3 more core formation cultivators there, making it a total of 6 core formation cultivators. It seems that I will have to give up this Howling Peak soon. If I don't leave now, I will die here." Behind him was a large stone table with distinct edges and corners. The lines were rough and hard, and one could tell at a glance that it was a rough product that was chiseled with knives and axes. On top of it were roasted pigs, tigers, wolves, and wild fruit wine. At this moment, the 3 core formation demon cultivators were gathered together, chewing and drinking. Their faces did not show any signs of distress from being forced by the Qinsong school. Hearing Master Jin Tan's words, one of the bald and bony demon cultivators turned around and laughed. "Cave Master Jin, why do you feel pity? The Qinsong school has already fallen into our trap these days. They really think we are powerless to resist. When we leave in the future, we will activate the 8-direction reversal array on this island and trap these Qinsong school disciples inside. This way, we will have the capital to bargain with the Qinsong school. Do you think this abode will escape from the hands of Cave Master Jin?" Brother Lon is right. My little king mountain may not be as grand as Cave Master Jin's, but it is still one of the best in the continent. Why don't we just give it up? Mistress Luotan has already said, there is a sacrifice, there is a gain. Dan Shimmy, don't you agree? The Yao cultivator who spoke had a plump body and protruding teeth. Every time he opened his mouth, a rumbling sound would be heard. He had a patch of dark brown hair on the back of his head that fluttered in the wind when he spoke. From time to time, he would stretch out his hand to stroke his hair, and he would also look at the female Yao with a pair of lecherous eyes. This female demon's face was like a peach blossom, her waist was like a willow, and her skin was as delicate as white jade. Her eyelids were covered with a layer of pink fragrant makeup. Her eyes were captivating and soft, but she was not interested in Zhao Xiong. She held a wine pot with her little finger and leaned lazily on the stone table without saying a word. Master Jean Tan coldly snickered. Why would I feel pity for the cave? We demons, even if we don't have a place to stay, we can just snatch another one. I'm just lamenting that Mistress Luo Tan didn't waste a single person. She only gave us a token and a set of formation flags, and we have no choice but to work hard here. She has a good sense of propriety, and her methods are really good. The female Yao with the surname Dan giggled. Why does Brother Jean have to say that? The reason we can leave with a clear conscience is all because of Mistress Luo Tan's promise. In the future, even if we can't take back the cave, at worst, we can just go to his place and be a guest. If we can't get used to it, we can just leave. With our cultivation level, are we afraid that no demon king will take us in? As soon as she opened her mouth, Zhao Xiong quickly followed up. Absolutely, absolutely. Lady Dan is the smartest among us. It's not a bad idea to follow you. As he spoke, he kept shaking the hair on the back of his head, feeling that he was extraordinary. The female Yao was sick of him, so she spat and turned her face away. Zhao Xiong, however, didn't mind. Seeing her flirting, he even laughed out loud. Master Jean Tan returned to the table and sat down. He reached out his hand and took a wine urn the size of a water tank and poured it into his mouth. After a few gulps, he wiped his mouth. In the end, it's still Mistress Luo Tan who doesn't want to use her own strength. If he was willing to send 2 Yuanian cultivators over, we wouldn't be in such an embarrassing situation. Lady Dan sneered. How can there be a lack of Yuanian cultivators in Qinsong School? If we were to fight head-on, most likely Mistress Luo Tan would suffer more losses. Brother Jean, it's not like you don't know. Without these Yuanian people, how can Mistress Luo Tan suppress the other tribes? If they don't force him, how can he bear to do it? Now that the Jade Blood Pool has been lost, he can rely on these clan members with high cultivation bases. At worst, he can just seize another abode. If these clan members are gone, how can he occupy such a huge abode? The bald demon cultivator laughed and said, Everyone, please don't worry. If Mistress Luo Tan doesn't give us the formation flags, what can we do? Even if Ning Chongxian, the god of death, came to kill us, we can't stop him. Hearing this, Master Jean Tan couldn't help but feel shocked. He sighed. It's a pity that Lu Ku from Bamboo Island had the same cultivation level as us, but he was killed by Ning Chongxian with 1 slash. Luckily, for some reason that day, Qinsong School didn't come to kill us. This gave us time to prepare. The bald demon cultivator raised his cup and said, Brother Jean, Brother Zhao, Lady Dan, come, let's drink this cup together. In the future, we'll give the Yutsong sect a good beating to vent our anger from the past few days. In the past few days, because Qinsong School's invasion of the eagle-perching continent was getting deeper and deeper, it would take them a day or 2 to return. Seeing that the other side was running out of energy, Gu Shuo knew that it was about time. The next time would be the time to attack in one go. Now, other than him, Fan Chongqing, and Fang Hong, there were 3 other core formation cultivators, and there were almost 400 Mystic Light Realm cultivators under them. With these people together, they could also form a formation. With the 6 flying palaces as a barrier, even normal Yuanian cultivators couldn't do anything. However, the more people there were, the scarcer the pills were. Gu Shuo didn't even hesitate to increase his merit to 2, hoping that Zhang Yan could refine more pills. Everyone knew that Zhang Yan's biochemical pill was a good thing. Even if he didn't use it himself, it would be good to exchange it for some magic treasures for his fellow sect members. Mo Tianhua made a promise in front of Yang Ying that day, so he remembered that he asked Zhang Yan for pills. He found out that Zhang Yan would refine a cauldron of pills every 3 days and would definitely go out after that. He would only return after dusk, and he would definitely be able to find Zhang Yan at that time. Therefore, he arrived at the door of the pill room early to stop Zhang Yan. Although Mo Tianhua was only at the first level of the mystic light realm, he always thought highly of himself. He thought in his heart, I'm the direct disciple of an elder, and I'm waiting for a pill refiner outside the pill room. This is very sincere, right? He didn't have to wait for long before he saw a tall figure walking over from afar. He'd never seen Zhang Yan in the past, and even if he'd inquired about Zhang Yan's name, he'd never taken it seriously. But at this moment, when he saw Zhang Yan's handsome appearance, steady bearing, and exuberant aura of the Tao, he couldn't help but retract his contempt. When Zhang Yan came close, he went forward and clasped his hands together, saying, "Is this junior brother Zhang? This one is Mo Tianhua, and I usually cultivate on Canggu Peak. I usually listen to Elder Qi's lectures on Tao. I'm sure junior brother Zhang has heard of me before?" There was a smile on his face, and although it looked friendly, it was actually a bit reserved. Zhang Yan saw Mo Tianhua blocking the door of the pill room. Just by looking at his demeanor, he knew what he was here for. These days, there were many Yu Tsang sect disciples who heard of his alchemy skills and came to ask for his help, but were all sent away. He returned the greeting indifferently. "So it's senior brother, what brings you here?" Mo Tianhua smiled lightly, saying, "Nothing else, I want to ask junior brother Zhang to refine a furnace of clear glass pills. The remuneration can be discussed, and I won't treat junior brother badly." Zhang Yan had to practice the carefree technique every day, and even refining the so-called biochemical pill was to deal with Gushua, so when did he really care about it? Why would he refine any pills for Mo Tianhua? He said calmly, "I'll have to disappoint senior brother, I have to refine biochemical pills for my fellow disciples, and I'm afraid I don't have the time to help senior brother." Mo Tianhua frowned slightly, saying, "Junior brother Zhang, it's not that I'm boasting, but if you help me, I can help you resolve any difficulties in the future. You can think about the pros and cons." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and no longer paid attention to him. He waved his sleeves and walked towards the pill room. Mo Tianhua saw that Zhang Yan still had such an indifferent attitude even though he had made it so clear, and he couldn't help but be furious. Originally, he thought that since he was the disciple of an elder, even if Zhang Yan was unwilling with his status, Zhang Yan would not dare to refuse. Who would have thought that Zhang Jie would not give him any face at all? For a moment he was put on the spot. If he waited for Zhang Yan to enter the pill room, he would have to wait for another 3 days. Previously, he had boasted in front of Yang Ing that he would settle this matter, but if he couldn't, wouldn't he lose all face? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but become ruthless, saying coldly, "That's not up to you. Stop right there." With a wave of his hand, a ray of yellow light swept over. This ray of light was as thick as ointment, and with a single movement, it carried an overwhelming aura. This was the frontier virtue enlightening profound light that he'd cultivated, and when he utilized it, it carried the might of a mountain. So long as it came into contact with the slightest bit, it would be able to suppress an ordinary cultivator to the point of being unable to move. He also had the intention to make Zhang Yan suffer, so he utilized the profound light a bit more fiercely. Zhang Yan's eyes turned cold, and with a point of his finger, a drop of dark in heavy water flew out, and actually arrived in front of Mo Tianhua in the blink of an eye. Mo Tianhua sneered inwardly, "This Zhang Yan really doesn't have any tricks up his sleeves, even his attacks are so petty, what can he do to me?" His light was best at defending himself against enemies, and with a flash of yellow light, a ray of light protected him, and the light in front of him continued to sweep towards Zhang Yan. He had originally thought, how powerful could a small drop of this thing be? But with a bang, his chest felt as if it was hit by a heavy hammer, and he was sent flying 3 to 4 feet away, unable to get up for a while. Every drop of this heavy water had the power of thousands of caddies. At such a close distance, how could it be resisted? Fortunately, his light was not ordinary, and Zhang Yan held back a bit, so he did not die on the spot. Zhang Yan sneered, and with a wave of his hand, 6 talismans flew out. Without looking at the result, he walked into the pill room, and with a wave of his sleeve, he closed the door. The 6 talismans were placed on Emo Tianhua's chest, head, and limbs. Don't look at it as a light piece of paper, but it closed the door to the spiritual energy in his body, and made it so that the blood and qi in his limbs couldn't move, and he could only lie on the ground, unable to get up. Emo Tianhua had just been hit by the Yin heavy water, and his internal organs were shaken, but his mind was still clear. It was just that he was suppressed by the talismans, and his body couldn't move, as if a mountain was pressing down on him, and he couldn't help but groan inwardly. At this time, he just happened to hear footsteps coming from afar, and felt that he really didn't have the face to see anyone, so he simply pretended to be unconscious. He heard someone say in a low voice, "Isn't that senior apprentice Brother Emo? Why is he lying here?" Another person looked around, and knew that the problem was with the talisman, and said, "Look at that talisman. Could it be that he offended senior apprentice Brother Zhang? Oh, is it that senior apprentice Brother Zhang in the pill room? He's just a pill master, and senior apprentice Brother Emo is Elder Qi's disciple. Even if the two of them fought, how could he lose to him? Hee, what do you know? This senior apprentice Brother Zhang is a true disciple. That day in the Flying Palace, I saw with my own eyes that he only used a sword talisman to kill a fierce demon general. I'm afraid senior apprentice Brother Emo didn't know what was going on, so he ran into him, and this you suffered." Hearing this, Emo Tianhua's heart trembled, and he knew that he had kicked an iron plate this time. In his heart he had never paid attention to a small pill master, or else he would know Zhang Yan's identity with a little inquiry. At this time, a wave of resentment rose up in his heart, but he couldn't vent it, and he roared in his heart, "Zhang Yan, you're clearly a true disciple. Why did you come here to refine pills?" Chapter 111. Emo Tianhua lay on the ground with his eyes closed and did not make a sound. He was usually arrogant, and other than a limited number of people, he did not think much of his fellow apprentices. Therefore, he was not very popular. After lying on the ground for an hour, no one came out to help him. They were all happy to see him make a fool of himself. Now that Zhang Yan's alchemy skills were quite famous, perhaps there would be a day when the disciples would need his help. Since it had nothing to do with him, why should he take the risk of offending Zhang Yan? But there were still some fellow disciples who could not stand it. After about an hour, a middle-aged cultivator with a broad face and long beard walked over with a dissatisfied expression and tore off the talisman in front of Emo Tianhua's chest. The talisman was mainly on the chest and the top of the head. Now that the chest was torn off, the qi orifice was opened, and there was no need to move anything else. Emo Tianhua's entire body was unobstructed, and with a flash of mysterious light, he shook off the other talismans. Emo Tianhua jumped up and bowed to the cultivator who saved him, saying, "Thank you, senior apprentice Brother Tuesday." Then feeling ashamed, he did not dare to look at anyone else, and left in a streak of light. That senior apprentice Brother Tu looked at Zhang Yan's door a few times, then coldly snorted and also left. At this moment, Zhang Yan's entire mind was focused on cultivation, and did not pay attention to the movements outside the door. At this moment, his shoulder shook, and that illusory figure appeared again. Now that he had practiced the escape method of the unfettered true form to the last step, he had already refined a drop of essence blood into the illusory figure, and the fake body gradually solidified. Other than the face being a little sluggish, its appearance was no different from the real person. But this fake body and the real body seemed to have a layer of adhesion, half separated, and had not yet separated from the real body. After silently cultivating for a long time, he suddenly felt the few key apertures tremble together, and his body involuntarily shook, as if a layer of something had been recorded on his body. When he opened his eyes, the fake body was already standing steadily in front of him. After taking a closer look, he couldn't help but smile as he thought to himself, "This fake body is standing in front of me. Just by looking at its appearance, even I can't tell it's real. If I don't test it, I definitely won't be able to tell it's fake." With a thought, the fake body began to walk around the pill room. It was as if he was moving his own body, and it was even more convenient than walking on his own. However, it was a pity that his current cultivation was still shallow, and the feeling of controlling this fake body was like controlling a magic tool. Although it could do all sorts of things according to his will, it did not have any combat ability. Even an ordinary person could easily knock it down with a punch. There was an even more profound method after the Jinshin Shao Yao Sutra, which allowed the fake body to see and hear things, just like what he felt. However, his current level of cultivation was still shallow, so he couldn't touch it. But right now, he only wanted to deceive Gushua. He didn't care too much about anything else. Zhang Yan looked at it for a while, waved his hand, and kept the fake body. Then he made a gesture, and his body became hazy. He was like a shadow, and it seemed that he would dissipate with a gust of wind. The most precious part of the Jinshin Shao Yao Sutra was this body concealing technique. It could be used together with the fake body, so he could hide himself at the same time, otherwise he wouldn't be able to deceive others. After using it a few times, Zhang Yan had already understood how to use this technique. He prepared to start refining pills again as he thought to himself. Since Gu Shua has decided to completely occupy the eagle-perching continent in 3 days, then if the other side has any arrangements, they will definitely be activated. It seems like that will be the time for him to escape. Forget it, I won't play any tricks with this furnace of pills. Thinking of this, he focused himself and began refining this furnace of pills. 3 days passed quickly, and the sound of the bell rang across the island once more. Everyone knew that they were going to take down the eagle-perching continent today, so no one dared to be slow. Before the sound of the bell stopped, other than the 6 core formation cultivators, everyone else had already gone to their respective flying palaces to wait. When Gu Shua sat down on the main seat of the palace, a disciple came out and said, Mo Tianhua, junior martial brother Mo has been comprehending his cultivation method with his eyes closed for the past few days, and it seems like he's about to break through, so it's not convenient for him to come out. That day, Mo Tianhua was taught a lesson by Zhang Yan, and he didn't complete the task that Yang Ying asked of him. He felt that he didn't have the face to see anyone, so he just found an excuse to not go. There were no less than 400 profound light realm cultivators in the 6 flying palaces, so Gu Shua obviously didn't care about one less profound light realm cultivator. He said lightly, I know. Fang Hong, who was sitting on the side, said with a smile that wasn't a smile, I heard that martial nephew Mo was injured by junior martial brother Zhang, is that true? If it is true, then junior martial brother Zhang's cultivation can't be underestimated. Why don't you come out with me? Gu Shua's eyebrows furrowed, and he was about to speak when Zhang Yan walked out and threw the bottle in his hand up with a smile. Gu Shua was startled, and when he caught it he found that there were 5 bottles in his hand. He opened them and saw that there were no less than 50 biochemical pills, far more than what he had gotten in the past 3 days. He couldn't help but be overjoyed and said, Good. Junior martial brother Zhang, I'll give you 2 rewards this time. Without waiting for Fang Hong to speak, he waved his sleeves and sent Zhang Yan to the pill room like usual. Seeing that Gu Shua wanted to protect him, Fang Hong snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. After Zhang Yan flew into the air, he used a technique, and with a light struggle, he left the fake body there and landed on the ground. Seeing the fake body turn a few times and go back to the pill room, he smiled lightly, knowing that Gu Shua hadn't seen through him. In fact, this was also because he had never shown any signs of resistance before. In Gu Shua's mind, every few days the pills would be given a reward, so there was no reason for Zhang Yan to leave. Therefore, after sending him out, he didn't pay much attention to him. In addition, his mind was on the last battle of the eagle-perching continent, and he was thinking about what kind of reward the sect would give him, so he didn't have time to pay attention to Zhang Yan. This allowed him to easily leave. While everyone was still in the palace, Zhang Yan used a concealment technique to leave the flying palace in a few steps. Not long after he left, he saw 5 rays of light fly out of the palace, each flying toward the Ling Shu flying palace at the top of the mountain. Soon, the 6 flying palaces all flew in the direction of the eagle-perching continent. Gu Shua had brought almost all the mystic light realm cultivators on the bamboo island this time, leaving only a few hundred clear chi realm disciples and 2 or 3 mystic light realm cultivators. In addition, there were also some clear chi realm disciples guarding the 18 islands on the southern lake. These places were filled with spirit qi, and these disciples knew that this was a rare opportunity. If they returned to the Qinsong school, they might not be able to find such a good cave again. Therefore, when they had time, they cultivated and didn't have time to pay attention to others. After Zhang Yan left the flying palace, no one noticed him. He stood on the peak of the mountain and looked in the direction of the eagle-perching continent. He thought that even if he was wrong, it wouldn't matter. With his fake body there, he wouldn't have to worry about being seen through, and he would have a chance to return to the pill room. If he was right, then this bamboo island would definitely be attacked by the Yao cultivators. However, the island was protected by the Jing Luo array flags, so there was no need to worry too much. He smiled faintly before turning around and flying to a secret place he had already decided on. The 6 flying palaces had come in a threatening manner, intending to exterminate all the demon cultivators here in one fell swoop. Thus, they did not hide their tracks as they headed straight for the deepest part of the eagle-perching continent, the Howling Cry Peak. Because there weren't any demon cultivators obstructing them, their journey was naturally unobstructed. Around half a day later, they saw an isolated mountain ahead, and there were 2 small peaks with extraordinary imposing auras on both sides. Below it was a beautiful lake with a few winding rivers, and the mountain was shaped like a soaring eagle. Thus, they knew they'd arrived at Howling Peak. But at this moment, there was no demonic qi on Howling Peak, and it was completely silent. Everyone was surprised and thought to themselves, could it be that the demonic cultivators here saw that they couldn't stop us, so they fled at the sight of us? Gu Shuo frowned. He felt that this place was too quiet, and that something was not quite right. He was about to say something when suddenly, countless black gusts of wind kicked up, sending sand and pebbles flying. Whistling sounds filled the air, and dark clouds covered the sky. The sky darkened, and even with his eyesight, it was difficult for him to see more than 300 meters away. In an instant, he could no longer see the other 5 flying palaces. HM? Could this be some kind of formation? Gu Shuo was startled and immediately thought that they had fallen into a trap. However, he quickly calmed himself down. With the Ling Shu flying palace, he wasn't afraid of the other side playing any tricks. Even if the Yuanying cultivators came, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him. However, seeing that most of the cultivators under his command seemed to be panicking, he immediately shouted and pretended to be disdainful. Junior brothers, don't worry. The Yao cultivators are out of tricks. It's just a mere trapping formation. What can they do? Gu Shuo had cultivated for hundreds of years, so he still had some eyesight. With one look, he knew that this formation wasn't a killing formation, but a trap to trap the people inside. When the Xian Light Realm disciples saw this, they couldn't help but calm down a bit. This disorientation formation was indeed not a powerful offensive formation, but this formation was adept at changing. It would change once every 2 hours, shifting its position and reversing the flow of qi, and after a few times, everyone would no longer know where they were. But at this moment, the sounds of killing suddenly came from all directions. Flags fluttered in the distance, and from afar, it seemed like there were tens of thousands of demon soldiers killing their way here. When everyone saw this, their expressions all changed. Only Gu Shuo's expression didn't change. After pondering for a moment, he smiled and said, "Don't panic, it's just an illusion." However, I think that there are demons mixed in with these illusions. As long as you don't leave the flying palace, there's nothing to worry about. Sure enough, when the demon soldiers got close, they charged forward and slashed wildly. They looked fierce, but the restriction didn't even move. Only then did everyone relax. A few Xian Light Realm disciples saw that some of the demon soldiers were different from the illusions and seemed to be real demons. Just as they were about to make a move, Gu Shuo stopped them and strictly ordered them not to take a step out. Chapter 112. After the 6 flying palaces entered the formation, in a few breaths, they were all moved to different directions by the formation. No matter how hard they tried, they were getting further and further away from each other. However, the demonic cultivators in the formation were different. They knew the path and had spells on them, so they could sense each other. With just a thought, They would be led by the formation to where they wanted to go. Jin Tanzong saw that Gushua was cunning and wouldn't come out easily. His original plan fell through, so he didn't have the patience to wait here. He sensed a direction and took a step forward. The scenery around him changed, and another flying palace appeared in front of him. However, the battle here was much more intense than Gushua's. There were tens of thousands of true and false demons in the sky. They surrounded the flying palace and attacked. The battle in the sky shook the earth. Dozens of Xian light disciples from Qinsong School charged left and right under the lead of a core formation cultivator. They moved back and forth in the illusion. This person seemed to be able to distinguish between real and fake. Every time, he would catch a few demon cultivators and turn them into dust with a burst of killing intent. Jin Tanzong knew that this was Fang Hong, who had made him suffer a few times. He thought, this Fang Hong is so overbearing. He dares to come out of the flying palace to fight with us. If that is the case, I will take you down first. I won't have to waste this trip. Lady Shan was exchanging blows with Fang Hong. The peach blossom petals on her body fell down one after another. It looked very beautiful. However, even Fang Hong didn't dare to let these petals touch him. Every time he used his Dan evil qi to block them. However, he came from the Shenmen Orthodox sect. After a few rounds, he forced Lady Shan to retreat. Though Lady Shan was at a disadvantage, she had the array to hide. When she was in danger, she just moved her mind and teleported away. She teleported out and returned without a second thought. She moved her eyes and saw Jean Tan. Her spirits rose and she called out, "Brother Jean, come help me. Let's take this man down together." Fang Hong was confident that his mana was strong and that he had a magical weapon on hand. He originally planned to use himself as bait to lure the Dan transformation demonic cultivator over and kill him. However, Lady Shan was very observant and would retreat at the slightest sign of trouble. He did not have a good opportunity. Now that he saw Jean Tan, he was not surprised but happy. He thought to himself, I was just about to capture both of you. Master Jean Tan walked the path of strength. He came up with a mountain-splitting axe in his hand. The axe shone brightly with talismans. With a loud roar, he did not care about Fang Hong's fierce qi of Dan and hacked down on his opponent's head. Fang Hong snorted and his Dan evil qi surged, forcing Lady Shan to take a few steps back. He raised his hand and a stream of heavenly water fell from the sky like a crystal waterfall. Lord Jean Tan did not dodge. His eyes were wide open and his aura became even more ferocious. He slammed his head forward and with a bang, the water curtain was broken. Fang Hong purposely showed a surprised expression, but his eyes were full of mockery. He was about to secretly play with the jade ring on his thumb. At this moment, there was a loud sound in the air. Black clouds rolled in front of the left, and demon qi overflowed. Zhao Xiong, who was holding a golden melon hammer, also turned his head and appeared. He let the hair on the back of his head flutter in the air, and his mouth was mumbling something. When Fang Hong saw this demon, his expression changed and he sighed in his heart. Although he appeared to be brave and fierce, he would never take risks unless he had a 90% chance of success. If 3 Golden Core Realm demon cultivators were to surround him, he would be able to hold them off. However, if another person were to come and use a magic treasure, then he might not be able to escape. He let out a loud roar and his Golden Core Realm demon aura surged out, forcing Jean and Dan back. Then he turned around and returned to the flying palace. However, as he left, the Xian light disciples were left behind. In terms of speed, how could they be faster than a core formation cultivator? However, Fang Hong only cared about his own interests. As long as he was fine, what did it matter if a few disciples died? Seeing this, Lady Shan was very angry. She snorted at Zhao Xiong and said, "Originally, Brother Jean and I could definitely take down this person. But when you came, you ruined it." Zhao Xiong had his eyes on Fan Chongqing, but at the same time he was snubbed. Just as he was feeling gloomy, he sensed that there was a lively fight going on here. Originally, he was quite interested in Lady Shan, so he felt somewhat itchy and rushed over. As soon as he arrived, Fang Hong ran as fast as he could. Originally, he was feeling complacent, but after being scolded by Lady Shan, he felt somewhat unhappy. An evil flame surged in his heart as he let out a strange cry and charged into the midst of the profound light realm disciples of the Azure Sea sect who had not yet had the time to turn around. He was completely unafraid of those flying swords of profound light as he used his large hands to grab them, opening his mouth and swallowing them whole. In a short while, he had eaten more than 20 people alive. Seeing that there were still many people in front of him who were about to escape into the flying palace, he laughed loudly and took out a pitch-black cloth bag. He shook his hand towards the disciples in front of him and opened the mouth of the bag. Instantly, a great suction force appeared and sucked in all the disciples who had not entered the restrictions of the flying palace. If Fang Hong, who was hiding in the flying word, reached out his hand, he might be able to save the lives of these disciples. However, he watched coldly and let the disciples of his sect be sucked away by Zhao Xiong without any intention of doing anything. At this time, a blue light flashed, and the bald and mangy beast cultivator appeared. He rubbed his bald head and said regretfully, "This Fang Hong is quite a character. I have been lying in ambush here for a while, but I couldn't find a good opportunity. I didn't think that he would leave when he saw the situation was not good. It's so hard to kill him." Jean Tan let out an angry howl as if he was venting his anger. He then turned around and asked, "Brother Lan, how are things on your side?" The bald beast cultivator shook his head and said, "I went to a few places, and the core formation cultivators all guarded the door tightly. No matter how many illusions attacked them, they wouldn't come out." Jean Tan frowned deeply and said with some annoyance, "Although this formation is not a killing formation and is not easily sensed, but in less than a day, the cultivators on Bamboo Island will notice what is happening here. If the flying sword message summons the powerful cultivators from Chinsong School here, wouldn't all of our efforts be for nothing?" Lady Shan giggled and said, "Brother Jean, why are you so troubled? Since Master Luo Tan gave us this set of formation flags, I think he must have thought of the current situation and must have a way to deal with them. Why don't we send someone to Master Luo Tan and ask for some advice?" The bald demon cultivator pondered for a moment. A fierce glint flashed in his green eyes as he said, "Although Lady Shan's words are reasonable, we can't ignore Lord Luo Tan's inaction. Since we're afraid of the cultivators on Bamboo Island reporting to us, we'll just kill them all. Now that Gushua and the others are wantonly attacking us, they must have sent out all their elites, so Bamboo Island must be empty. It's just a defensive formation that's a little troublesome. Can Brother Zhao hand over the captured cultivators of Dark Azure sect to me? I will control their original spirits and deceive them to open the formation. Then we can take this place." Zhao Xiong laughed and said, "I heard that Brother Lan once cultivated in the demonic path. I want to see what you can do. I originally wanted to enjoy these people slowly, but this is more important. Take them all." While muttering an incantation, he took out the black sack and poured out all the cultivators of Yudzong sect. The bald demon cultivator did not have a magic treasure that could capture people like him. With a deep shout, he threw out a rope as thick as a goose egg. With a wave of his hand, he tied the more than 20 people into a long string and dragged them behind him. He took a step forward, and in a flash, he brought these disciples out of the battle formation. As soon as he left, the eyes of the three demons blurred. In front of them, a Taoist child with a fringe on his forehead appeared. He smiled at the three demons and said, "Are the few of you helpless against the flying palace of the spirit pivot? I am here on the orders of my master and Master Luo Tan to help you." This Taoist child was strange. No matter how they looked, they couldn't tell what his cultivation base was. But the fact that he could step into the formation proved his identity. Lady Shan covered her mouth and giggled. She winked and said in a sweet voice, "Little brother, how can you help us?" The Taoist child giggled and said, "I have a talisman in my hands called the Spatial Assimilation Banner. It was personally made by Lord Luo Tan and my master. It is good at absorbing foreign objects. If one's cultivation is high enough, even an island or a mountain can be stored in it. 6 mere flying palaces are nothing to me." As he spoke, he flaunted a black banner, waving it lightly at Fang Hong's flying palace, and kept it. The three demons were shocked. They had never heard of such a magic weapon. It was used to absorb the flying palaces. If it was used to absorb them, would they be able to avoid it? Wouldn't it be more accurate? Instantly, they looked at the Taoist child with awe. The Taoist child was secretly proud of himself. In fact, this flag was not as powerful as these people thought. If it were not for the fact that these core formation cultivators could not break out of this array and could not distinguish the scenery in front of them, they would not have dared to touch it for fear of triggering some restriction, and he would not have been able to capture it so easily. The Taoist child smiled and went to the next place. Soon, he absorbed the 6 flying palaces one by one. Then, he bowed to the 3 demons and smiled, "Thank you for your help." This time, with the 6 core transformation cultivators of Qinsong School and nearly 400 mystic light realm cultivators as hostages, Qinsong School won't dare to attack the Jade Blood Pond. It was just that although the 3 demons had done this, they were still nervous. Lady Shan asked a little unconfidently, "A core formation cultivator is nothing to Yudsong sect. Can this small number of people really force them to not dare to make a move?" A bright smile appeared on the Taoist child's face, and he seemed to want to show off. "Don't worry, many of those mystic light realm cultivators are disciples of the elders of Qinsong School, so of course, they are useful. Also, one of the 6 core transformation cultivators is the disciple of Linlang Grotto Heaven's Qinjinren. This Qinjinren has a special status in Qinsong School." The sect master of Qinsong School didn't obtain his position properly back then, and he only became the sect master because he sold many benefits to the aristocratic families and received the support of this Qinjinren. However, after he became the sect master, he purposely suppressed the aristocratic families and needed the support of this Qinjinren. He can give up these disciples, but of course, Qinjinren can't say anything on the surface, but if he gets close to the aristocratic families in the future, this sect master definitely doesn't want to see him, so he can only pinch his nose and accept it. Seeing that the Taoist child explained things so clearly and heard so many secrets, the 3 demons couldn't help but ask curiously, "Little Taoist, how do you know so many things?" The Taoist child smiled mysteriously and said, "Although there was a bloody battle in Qinsong School back then, and many cultivators with high cultivation died, there were still many who escaped." As he said that, his expression suddenly changed, and he said with a bitter expression, I said too much. Master is going to punish me again." Chapter 113. The bald beastkin cultivator came to the front of the eagle perching continent, looking at Bamboo Knot Island across the lake. Although in front of him was a clear blue water, and under the bright moonlight the outline of the mountain was clearly visible, but in the eyes of a beast cultivator like him, there was a soft bright light in the sky, covering the entire island. Looking at the 24 unconscious Qinsong School disciples on the ground, he smiled coldly and sat down cross-legged. He seemed to be chanting something as he looked at the face of one of the disciples. Then, a green light seemed to enter the forehead of the disciple. He had once learned a soul-controlling technique from an incomplete book. It was good at controlling people's minds and searching the soul of the soul. This disciple had no power to resist, so of course, he could do as he pleased. As soon as this thought entered, it roamed around the disciple's sea of consciousness, forcibly searching through many memories. Even the little things hidden in the depths of the disciple's memories were not left out. The bald old monster found them one by one. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, the bald old monster's face was full of resentment. Although he had already guessed that these normal disciples might not know the method to open and close the restriction on Bamboo Island, he still had a sliver of hope in his heart. Who would have thought that after trying, there would really be no results? After having his soul searched, this disciple was useless. Even if he came back to life, he would be an idiot. The bald old monster let out a strange laugh and said, "Let's not waste it." He reached out with a hand that was as thin as a chicken's claw and grabbed the disciple. He didn't care about eating raw food and started to chew. He didn't care that his mouth was full of blood and seemed to be enjoying it. This ancestor has eaten so many people, but the disciples of immortals are the most delicious. If it's a disciple of a big sect like Qinsong School, then it's the best. His green eyes flashed. Although he didn't obtain the method to open the restriction from this disciple, he knew how to sneak in from the disciple's memories. In order to open the restriction on the island, one was to use a token and the other was a spell. The spell could only allow one to enter and leave. If one wanted to let others in, they had to use a token. There was one person on the island who had a secondary token, and his cultivation was only at the first level of the mystic light realm. According to his original plan, it wouldn't be hard to trick him, but the method would be a little more troublesome. After thinking for a long time, he decided that his plan was safe, so he stuffed the last part of the disciple's body into his mouth and swallowed it. He let out a strange laugh and sat down cross-legged, but his eyeballs kept rolling under his closed eyelids. Not long after, the muscles on his face slightly twisted, and he suddenly let out a muffled groan. 23 balls of light that seemed to be chi but were not chi appeared above his head. They paused in the air for a moment, then floated toward the bodies of all the Ingtsang sect disciples on the ground, and then entered their heads one by one. This spell was one of the 3 spells recorded in the demonic book. It was called the Illusion Heart Curse. As long as a restriction was placed on the origin spirit, a divine sense seed could be inserted into it. This divine sense seed was extremely wondrous. It could create all kinds of illusions in the mind of the person being controlled, distorting their original memories. Afterward, the divine sense seed wouldn't order the person to do anything. Instead, the divine sense seed would find a way to trigger the obsession in the person's heart. When the time was right, the divine sense seed would magnify the obsession by several times. Finally, under the influence of this obsession, the divine sense seed would be controlled by the divine sense seed. The bald old monster had cultivated this spell for a long time and felt that this demonic book wasn't as simple as it seemed. It seemed like there were some other benefits that he didn't get. However, this book was incomplete and there were as many demonic spells in the world as there were stars in the sky. He couldn't find out what this spell was. After casting the incantation, he stood up and paced back and forth on the spot. He thought to himself, since I've already used this method, I might as well use the heart incantation as well to avoid any mistakes. As soon as he thought of this, he took action. Looking left and right, he came to the bottom of a large boulder. With a surge of Dan Fiend energy, he opened up a large hole in the ground. Leaping into the hole, the large boulder automatically rolled upwards, covering his figure. His heart attachment incantation allowed him to attach his mind to a living person without the person's knowledge. At a critical moment, he could seize the person's body and use it for his own. However, after using this incantation, he could not move. If he moved, all his previous efforts would be wasted, and it might even be troublesome. Therefore, he was not too willing to use it, so he found a safe place to hide. A moment later, 3 of the Chinsong school disciples who were lying on the ground slowly regained consciousness. However, their memories had all been tampered with by the bald old monster, so they were different from before. They only remembered that their senior and junior brothers had fought a bloody battle with the demonic cultivators of the eagle-perching continent. Just as they were gaining the upper hand, a powerful ash wolf appeared out of nowhere and scattered them. The 6 core transformation cultivators struggled to hold on, but could only barely block it. They were ordered to return first to avoid being slaughtered. This was because the bald old monster also had a bit of vanity in his heart. When he tampered with everyone's memories, he had deliberately made his original form look like this. However, the old monster was also very cautious. He knew that if he sent these 20 or so disciples together, there would be no way out if they couldn't deceive the restriction. Thus, he decided to send a few disciples to scout the way first. If there was any oversight, they could make up for it. These 3 disciples flew all the way to the sky above Bamboo Island. Because they couldn't enter the restriction, they naturally flew back and forth, not going anywhere. The streak of light immediately alerted a disciple in charge of the restrictions on the island. His name was Tu Song, and because he had started cultivating late, his cultivation had stagnated after reaching the mystic light realm. Seeing that he had aged for a year, he had also lost interest in cultivating. However, he was a passionate person and loved to help disciples with low cultivation, so he was quite popular among the disciples of Bright Chi realm. Thus, Gu Shua had given him the secondary talisman, but in reality he had never used it after so many days. At this moment, when he saw the abnormality in the sky, he quickly flew up and shouted through the restriction, "Senior brothers, where are you?" One of the three immediately said, "How come Senior Brother 2 doesn't recognize this little brother? I am Senior Brother Fong's disciple, Pan Hong." Tu Song said in surprise, "It really is Junior Brother Pan. Didn't you follow Martial Uncle Gu and the other senior brothers to conquer the eagle-perching continent? Why are you here?" Pan Hong sighed, It's a long story. Senior Brother 2, quickly open the restriction and let us in." Tu Song hesitated for a moment before cupping his hands and saying, "I don't know what happened, but let's make it clear. Martial Uncle Gu said that without a jade token, we can't open the restriction. This senior brother has a duty, so please forgive me." Pan Hong also had a look of understanding. This was his sincerity and not the slightest bit of pretense. He immediately recounted what happened in his memory. What? When Tu Song heard that something like this had happened, he was a bit panicked. However, he didn't know whether he should believe these people or not. For a moment, he was a bit hesitant. Pan Hong hurriedly said, "Senior brother, don't be embarrassed. I remember that there are other senior brothers behind us. Wait for a while and listen to what they have to say. It won't be too late for you to open the restriction." Tu Song's heart relaxed. In his heart, he also felt that even if one or two people's words were not true, with more people, the truth could be distinguished. Sure enough, it wasn't long before more disciples arrived in 2s and 3s. There were already more than 10 people, and all of them spoke the same language. Tu Song felt relieved and took out the talisman. He was just about to open the restriction when he heard someone step forward and grab his wrist. "Wait!" the person said. Tu Song turned his head in surprise and saw that it was a handsome young cultivator. He couldn't help but be startled and said, "This junior brother, who are you? Why are you stopping me?" The cultivator said lightly, "This one is Zhang Yan." "Zhang Yan?" Tu Song was startled, then he snorted coldly and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's a true disciple. What's wrong? Is it not enough for you to teach junior brother Mo a lesson? Do you want to meddle with my affairs?" It turned out that Tu Song was the middle-aged cultivator who tore off the talisman from Mo Tianhua's body. However, he didn't know the cause and effect, but because of this matter, his impression of Zhang Yan became much worse. He first thought that Zhang Yan was a disciple who relied on his status and alchemy to do whatever he wanted. Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. He said, "Senior brother 2, there is no need to be angry. I naturally have my reasons for stopping you." Tu Song said angrily, "What reasons do you have?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Senior brother just said that Martial Uncle Gu said that without the jade token, you can't open the restriction. Then let me ask you, where is the jade token?" This. Tu Song hesitated again. The bald old monster could hear the conversation clearly even if he borrowed the ears of the other disciples. He thought to himself, "Where did this little thief come from? How dare he ruin my plans?" He tried his best to chant a mantra, arousing the anger of a disciple. This disciple was already dissatisfied with Zhang Yan, and now that he was urged by the old monster, he naturally couldn't stand it anymore. He scolded loudly, "You, Zhang Yan, are just a pill master. How do you know how hard it is for us senior brothers to fight outside? Besides, this matter is not under your jurisdiction. Why are you making sarcastic remarks?" As soon as he said this, everyone started to criticize him. Someone even said, "I remember that Zhang Yan should be refining pills in Martial Uncle G's pill room. Why is he here? This person is suspicious. Is he a spy? Senior brother 2, don't be fooled." As soon as Tu Song heard these words, he seemed to have made up his mind. He pulled his wrist from Zhang Yan's hand and said coldly, "Junior brother Zhang, this matter is not under your jurisdiction. If there is any crime, I will bear it. You should leave." Being scolded by everyone, Zhang Yan acted as if nothing had happened. He said unhurriedly, "Senior brother 2, don't be anxious. I will give you an idea that satisfies both sides. Since Martial Uncle Gu and the others encountered a great monster that is difficult to resist, We must ask for help from the sect. Since that is the case, why don't we let these senior brothers return to the sect directly and report this matter to the sect master and other spiritual masters? This way, it will not violate the rules and it will be safe. What do you think? Hearing Zhang Yan's words, Tu Song felt that there was some truth in it. He didn't want to find trouble with him, so he couldn't help but hesitate. The bald old monster was stunned on the island and said in annoyance, "How could I forget this? Who is this little thief? Why is he so difficult to deal with? But fortunately, I have a way to make up for this." He immediately activated his mental cultivation method and seized the body of the disciple who had cast the heart incantation. He coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood, then his body loosened and was about to fall. The surrounding disciples cried out in alarm. Several people rushed forward to support him and said, "Junior Brother Chen, what happened to you?" Junior Brother Chen said weakly, "I was injured by a monster cultivator's strange method just now. I have been using medicinal pills to keep me alive. But now that I have finished the medicinal pills, I have no strength left." Pan Hong turned to Tu Song and said, "Senior Brother Tu, we can all not enter the island. But this Junior Brother Chen's injuries are so serious, you should let him in, right?" Senior Apprentice Brother Tu nodded firmly. "That's how it should be." He turned to look at Zhang Yan. He thought that he would definitely stop them. Who knew that Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Senior Brother Tu, opening the restriction is breaking the rules. Letting one person go is letting two people go is also letting them go. Why don't we let them all in?" Chapter 114. The old bald monster didn't know what Zhang Yan was planning, but he was happy inside. "I wanted to get a few more disciples to pretend to be injured, but now it's easier. No matter how cunning this little thief is, these disciples might not be as strong as me, but their own abilities aren't any weaker. This little thief is only at the first level of mystic light. Wait for my puppets to go in and kill him and the others. Then, I'll take the talisman and kill all the disciples of the Qinsong school on the island. This should buy us at least 2 days, right? I'm sure the matter with Jin Tan will be done by then." What he didn't know was that the 6 flying palaces had already been taken by the boy, so it didn't matter whether he took the bamboo island or not. However, none of the demons took this matter to heart. In their opinion, it would be best if the bald old demon succeeded, but if he failed, it didn't matter. Why would they want to dampen his spirits? Therefore, no one came to tell him. When Zhang Yan saw these disciples come back, he was sure that his previous guess was correct. Something must have happened up ahead. Although he didn't think that these people's minds had been tampered with, there were many ways for cultivators to coerce or control someone. It wasn't just the methods of the demon sections. He didn't need to think too much about it. There were many suspicious points just from the words and actions of these people. Originally, he was prepared to stop Tu Song, but after thinking about it, with Tu Song's righteous and caring personality, unless he killed this person, he would open the restriction. Moreover, as long as one person came in, it would be a precedent, and there would be a second or third person coming in. Moreover, it was most likely that Tu Song himself had leaked the method to enter the array. Once a great demon found out about it, no one would be able to stop him. Since that was the case, he might as well let these people in. There were only 15 people here. If there was really a ghost, he would just kill them all. At first, Tu Song thought that Zhang Yan was being sarcastic, so he walked a bit further away. Seeing that Zhang Yan really didn't come up to stop him, he felt relieved. He waved the talisman in his hand and opened the restriction, but he was also cautious. He waited for these people to come in one by one, then immediately closed the restriction. Seeing him do this, the old bald monster was glad that he didn't act rashly. The eagle perching continent was still a distance away from Bamboo Island, and there was no place to hide in the water. The moment the restriction was opened, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. Now that he saw the disciples who were under his curse enter the barrier one by one, he calmed down. He sneered and activated his spell, immediately arousing the hatred and killing intent in the hearts of these disciples. Pan Hong's mind had just stepped into Bamboo Island when a thought suddenly emerged in his mind. My family is fighting with their lives on the line. but these two people are safe and sound. Not only that, me and my senior and junior brothers ran all the way back, hoping to be comforted and supported by our fellow sect members, but instead we were bullied and suspected. These two people are really hateful, they really deserve to be killed. This thought had appeared in his mind before, but he didn't show it and just flashed it away. This was like a mortal seeing gold and silver beauties. His heart couldn't help but want to snatch them away. But everyone was rational, and with the exception of a few people, the average person would never put such thoughts into practice. But he didn't know why, but when this thought appeared in Pan Hong's mind, he couldn't suppress it. He felt that he had to kill this person to vent the hatred in his heart, and this evil fire burned more and more fiercely. It seemed that only by achieving his heart's desire would he be able to remove the layer of shackles on his body and obtain true freedom and joy. The more he thought about it, the more intense this thought became. In the end, besides the thought of killing the two people in front of him, everything else was thrown to the back of his mind. Not long after, he looked at Zhang Yan and Tu Song with eyes filled with killing intent. Not only him, but the dozen or so disciples behind him also had their killing intent aroused by various reasons, becoming just like him. At this moment, these disciples had actually been possessed by the devil and had completely become tools in the hands of the old bald monster. Even if the old monster removed his curse, they would no longer return to being the original Qinsong school disciples. Looking at these people's ferocious eyes and monstrous killing intent, even Tu Song felt that something was wrong. He wanted to retreat, but it was already too late. The 10 disciples let out a loud cry and simultaneously released their profound lights, attacking Zhang Yan and Tu Song from both sides. Tu Song's cultivation base was also sloppy, otherwise Gu Shuo wouldn't have ordered him to guard Bamboo Island. Now that 15 disciples were attacking him, even if not all of them were aimed at him, he still couldn't resist. 4 or 5 mysterious lights brushed past him, and his body was cut into 4 or 5 pieces, dying instantly. On the other side, Zhang Yan was the same, and most of the mysterious lights were aimed at him. But the strange thing was, in the face of such a dangerous situation, Tu Song at least tried to struggle, but he didn't even make a move to resist. He let the mysterious lights fall on him and his body was torn apart. More than 10 mysterious lights swept over him, and in an instant, not even the slightest residue was left. The old bald monster paused and thought to himself, I thought he was quite a character, how could he be killed so easily? However, since he had entered Bamboo Island, the life and death of a mystic light realm cultivator wasn't important to him. With a thought, he ordered the disciples to look around for the restriction jade token. The strange thing was that the jade token was clearly in Tu Song's hand, but after searching for a long time, he couldn't find it. The old bald monster was, after all, a monster that dominated an area. After thinking for a bit, he knew where the problem was and thought, not good, I fell for that little thief's trap. At this moment, Zhang Yan was already standing on the peak of Heng Feng. His eyes were calm, and he was holding the restriction jade token in his hand. All he did was give up a fake body that he had just refined. He didn't even have time to refine his blood essence into it, and he used a concealment technique to escape. However, the disciples were all blinded by the killing intent and only knew how to kill living beings, so they obviously couldn't tell which one was real and which one was fake. As for the old monster, he was only borrowing the eyes and ears of the disciples and wasn't personally present, so he wasn't very skilled. He didn't think that the old monster would have such a strange technique, so he was easily fooled. When the bald old monster saw that he couldn't find the talisman, he became furious. He gave an order and the 15 cultivators split up, moving in groups of 2s and 3s towards the various cultivators on the Bamboo Island. Zhang Yan looked coldly at the streaks of light flying in all directions, and a cold, killing intent filled his brow. He jumped up and flew towards a streak of light. These disciples were all at the first or second level of the mystic light realm. They weren't like Ren Mingyao, who had received the inheritance of his master and had treasures. The difference between the two was huge, and he wasn't scared even if they teamed up and attacked him together. However, in that instant, he suddenly felt that the dozen or so people were blinded at almost the same time. It seemed to be some kind of demon. He had cultivated in a demonic cultivation before, so he was naturally very sensitive to this kind of change. This wasn't simple. One had to know that the demonic arts were extremely strange. Who knew what kind of unknown methods were hidden inside? Therefore, he immediately gave up his fake body and left with the token. He decided that it wouldn't be too late to make a move after seeing what was wrong with these disciples. Apart from 1 or 2 mystic light realm cultivators who didn't have high cultivation, there were only 100 or so clear chi realm disciples left on Bamboo Island. These blinded cultivators only felt their hearts overflow with killing intent and were tormented. Only by killing everything they saw would they feel better. Therefore, they didn't show any mercy when they saw these clear chi realm disciples. Screams and howls could be heard everywhere on the island. Zhang Yan only identified 3 of them and followed them all the way. Even when they were killing those Ming Chi disciples, he did not immediately stop them. After taking a few careful looks, he saw that they only used a few moves left and right. Moreover, they were in a daze and did not know how to restrain themselves, using as much strength as they could. He couldn't help but laugh coldly and say, "Only s." There were still a few clear chi realm disciples who were still resisting even though they knew they weren't a match for them. One of the taller disciples even rushed out to protect the people behind him. Zhang Yan didn't hesitate anymore. He waved his sleeve and a blue light flew out. The 3 bewitched disciples instinctively sensed danger when they saw the sword radiance flying over. They all used their profound light to block it. A hint of mockery appeared on Zhang Yan's face. How fast and agile was the star sword pellet with the golden fire profound light. It circled in the air 3 times and easily avoided the 3 profound lights, cutting off the heads of the 3 people. The clear chi realm disciples originally thought that they were dead for sure, but who would have thought that a sword light as bright as a star would suddenly fly in from the sky and instantly kill 3 people. Then, their vision blurred and Zhang Yan appeared in front of them. He said indifferently, "These people have already fallen to the devil and are wreaking havoc on the island. I still have to save the other disciples, so I don't have time to care about you guys. You guys find a place to hide." The taller clear chi realm disciple cupped his hands and said gratefully, "Thank you for your help, Martial Uncle." Zhang Yan didn't reply and nodded slightly. His body turned into a rainbow and disappeared with a flash of blue light. The disciple's heart was filled with yearning as he thought to himself, "Only when one reaches this step can one be considered a cultivator. If I had such a cultivation, I wouldn't have been trampled on like I did just now." At this moment, the thoughts of the great Tao in this disciple's heart suddenly became incomparably firm. The bald old monster's divine sense suddenly throbbed as if he had dropped something. With a thought, he knew what had happened and the anger in his heart burned even more. His divine sense couldn't be divided without a limit and could only take care of 2 or 3 places at most. These 3 disciples were coincidentally not placed by his divine sense, so they could only act instinctively under the drive of killing intent. They couldn't even display much of their original abilities and could only rely on their realms to kill those clear chi realm disciples. Naturally, they were easily killed by Zhang Yan. Chapter 115. As a core transformation demonic cultivator, how rich was the old bald monster's combat experience? Just from the fact that the 3 disciples were killed in an instant, and from a few clues, he could tell that Zhang Yan could control a flying sword. That was not all. Zhang Yan could clearly hide himself from others, but instead of hiding, he came out to kill those disciples. From this, it could be seen that he was brave and fearless, and knew how to change according to the situation. This kind of person was the most difficult to deal with. Unless he gathered all the disciples under his control in one place, he would be killed one by one sooner or later. The old bald monster was now certain that the talisman that controlled the restriction was in Zhang Yan's hands. He had always thought highly of himself, but he did not expect that things would not go well for him after meeting Zhang Yan tonight. He snorted coldly and said, "Junior, I, your ancestor, will put down my arrogance and use this technique to fight with you personally." This art of his was a secret art recorded in the incomplete book. It could raise the cultivation of the person to whom his mind was attached by 1 or 2 levels in a short period of time. At the same time, it could form a purgatory mystic light that could fight in his place. Of course, the demonic sect paid particular attention to plundering and killing, so this cultivation source would not appear out of thin air. It had to be obtained from somewhere else. He immediately sent out a summon through his mind. The disciples who were killing everywhere received his summon and all flew to the same place. Mo Tianhua was originally cultivating in a house that was originally occupied by a demonic cultivator, but every time he thought of the scene of being beaten to the ground by Zhang Yan and being watched by so many people, his face would turn dry, and he would be too embarrassed to talk. He would clench his fists until they made cracking sounds. Moreover, the way Zhang Yan looked at him as if he was nothing made him feel even more resentful. However, just as he was thinking about how he could take revenge, 3 fellow disciples rushed in out of nowhere and attacked him without saying a word. These 3 people's cultivation was not lower than his, and in a hasty defense, Mo Tianhua was seriously injured in the blink of an eye. He thought that he was going to die, but unexpectedly, when the 3 were about to attack, they suddenly froze. Without saying a word, they broke through the roof and disappeared in a flash. Zhang Yan was also chasing after the 2 disciples who had been drugged, but before he could act, the 2 had already flown away. At this time, he could see another sword light flying in another direction. He thought for a moment and knew that the persons secretly controlling them must have noticed his plan to attack them one by one, so he immediately gathered these people together. He smiled coldly and did not chase after them. He leaped into the sky, and as he neared the restriction, he chanted a spell in his heart and naturally rushed up to the cloud without any hindrance. He stopped and took out a pen and paper from his sleeve. With a wave of his hand, he wrote down the situation here, then took out the Howling Lake golden sword and put it in the letter. With a pat of his palm, a weak golden light flew in the direction of Qinsong School. On the bamboo island below, of the 15 disciples originally controlled by the bald old demon, 3 had already been killed by Zhang Yan, so only 12 people were gathered together. At this moment, they were standing there like wooden pillars, not saying a word or moving. The disciple that the old bald monster had attached his consciousness to was currently sitting cross-legged on the ground, making all sorts of strange movements with his hands. A beam of light blue profound light rose from the top of his head, but after a short while, the profound light slowly transformed into a black and red ball of light that flickered erratically. His eyes also flashed with a faint green light. This disciple had already been completely taken over by the bald patriarch. Furthermore, all of the sensations were shared by the bald patriarch. In fact, it could be said that this body was like a clone of the bald patriarch. If this clone was killed, the bald patriarch would lose decades of cultivation. The bald patriarch snorted and rose to his feet with a flick of his sleeve. He reached out and grabbed one of the disciples who was standing still. Then, he opened his mouth and sucked a stream of blood essence out of the disciple's mouth. Then he stored it in his body. After swallowing, he tossed aside the shriveled body and hung another disciple before opening his mouth and devouring another one. After sucking out the blood essence of 2 people, he was about to grab the next one, but unexpectedly, this disciple suddenly turned into a pile of ash out of thin air. He couldn't help but be startled, and before he could react, he felt an indescribable feeling surge up his body. That feeling was simply too wonderful, as if he had swallowed some miraculous spirit pill, and his entire body felt light and airy. After silently examining it, he felt as if his spirit had grown a little stronger out of thin air. He stood there in shock for a while before coming back to his senses, and a look of realization appeared on his face as he thought to himself, there is indeed a method to this demonic secret manual. It is to ignite the 7 emotions of others and refine their tooth essence into a wisp of spirit to nourish the body. However, this method is too troublesome, and I don't have the heart of a mind to continue cultivating. He had used this technique to control hundreds of demonic cultivators before, but not many of them were able to ignite their emotions. It was obvious that this requirement was very strict, and not everyone could achieve it. Although it could strengthen his spirit, he didn't have any other demonic cultivation techniques, and he couldn't ambush cultivators of the same cultivation as him. Therefore, this technique was useless to him, and he threw it to the back of his head and continued to suck blood. As he sucked the blood of more and more disciples, the cultivation of this body continued to rise. In order to not attract too much attention, he chose to attach his consciousness to a cultivator at the first level of the mystic light realm, but after 3 days, he had reached the second level of the mystic light realm. This was also because he was a core formation cultivator, so he didn't have to worry about making any mistakes. After he finished devouring everyone's blood essence, he leapt up and directly became a mystic light realm King Zhong cultivator. A ball of black and red light flashed above his head, and it gave off an evil and mysterious aura. Apart from his physical body being different from normal cultivators, the mystic light he formed was even stronger than normal cultivators at the third level of the mystic light realm. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't increase his cultivation anymore. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. If there was someone else, he might be able to merge the mystic light realm and spirit energy and form a small golden core. However, his current cultivation seemed to be enough to deal with Zhang Yan. At this moment, his appearance changed drastically. The disciple that he had taken over was a handsome young master, but now, his eyebrows were like a line of blood, and his red hair was dancing like fire, almost reaching the ground. His entire body gave off an indescribable evil aura, and he had the appearance of a demon. Although his movements were complicated when he cast the spell, it only took him a dozen or so breaths to finish everything. At this moment, his expression changed, and he looked up at the sky. He saw a streak of blue light breaking through the air, and before the sharp sword energy even reached him, he felt a tearing sensation on his skin. The bald old monster laughed strangely and said, "Little thief, your ancestor has been waiting for you." He let out a howl that sounded like a wolf's howl. His shoulders shook, and the black and red light above his head flipped upwards, forming a claw that grabbed at the sky. Zhang Yan faintly smiled. Although his sword light looked bright, it was actually just an act, and he didn't use much strength. Just as the two lights were about to collide, he suddenly dodged to the side. At this moment, a green light flew out of his sleeve and went straight for the bald old monster's head. After shooting out the Rui God shuttle, Zhang Yan didn't wait for his body to stabilize. He also shot out the star sword ball in his hand, and two lights, one green and one blue, went straight for the bald old monster. However, much to his surprise, both the divine Rui shuttle and the starlight sword pill passed through his body with extreme ease, as if he had completely forgotten to evade. The bald old monster took a few steps back and looked at the two bowl-sized holes on his chest. He chuckled and reached out to wipe the holes with his hand. A stream of blood immediately filled the holes, and in a flash, the flesh there was completely regenerated. Now, he was only controlling this body with his mind, and the original spirit of his main body had long been devoured by him. No matter how serious the injury was, even if his head was cut off, as long as the vitality in his body was not exhausted, he could reattach it. Moreover, the Xian seed in his body contained the vitality of more than 10 people. Even if Zhang Yan killed him 10 times, he wouldn't be able to exhaust the vitality. Seeing this situation, Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. However, after he put away the Rui God shuttle, he couldn't help but frown. The Rui God shuttle was originally flowing with green light, and the spiritual energy was oppressive. However, after it returned, it seemed to have been burned by something. Not only did the divine light on it dim a bit, but he could also vaguely hear a cry. Clearly, it had been seriously injured. He took back the star's sword orb and looked at it, but it was not damaged in the slightest. After thinking about it, he understood that this was probably because the star's sword orb had his own golden fire mystic light attached to it, which was why the other party couldn't do anything to it. He looked down and narrowed his eyes. A cold light suddenly flashed in his eyes. In this case, it seemed that he could only use his own mystic light to take care of this demon. He took out 2 flying swords from his sleeve, made a hand seal, and soared into the sky, hovering above his head. Seeing this, the bald old monster laughed and said, "No matter how many magic treasures you have, it's useless to me." Junior Thai. With a sway of his body, a ray of light rushed up into the sky. Zhang Yan stretched out a finger, pointed forward, and shouted, "Go!" The two flying swords let out a sharp whistle, slashing towards the other party's head one after the other. The bald old monster had a disdainful look on his face. The black and red mystic light on the top of his head stretched forward and caught the two flying swords. With just a roll, the spiritual energy on the swords was instantly erased, and they were completely turned into a pile of ordinary iron, falling to the ground. However, while he was still feeling proud, the two flying swords followed closely in front of him. It was a golden fire mystic light that was as bright as the sun. He couldn't help but change his expression, and then a sinister smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. With a loud shout, he rushed towards the golden fire without dodging. However, neither of them knew that at this moment, thousands of miles away, on the Baixian peak of Qinsong School, a cultivator in white who was meditating suddenly opened his eyes and shot a cold gaze. He said, "Who hurt my Rui God shuttle?" You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.